What's up everyone, how are you all? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments, and also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto Uzumaki, age 5. Naruto had been picked on his entire life in the orphanage. He never managed to fit into the other kids around him. Many called him mean names, and others ignored him. Nobody had ever shown him even the slightest amount of kindness. They treated him less than human. It was a hard life. The only thing that kept him alive was the threat of the Hokage's wrath upon anyone who dared to harm him. They still kept him just alive. He was never shown comfort when he was sick. He was never shown care when he was hurt. Naruto attempted to run away. He was missing for 16 hours before a silver-haired Anbu found him hiding in the forest near Training Grounds 43. Upon finding him, the Anbu quickly brought him to the Hokage Tower. "I have located Uzumaki Sanm Lord Hokage," the silver-haired Anbu said with a bow. Under his arm was the Uzumaki in question, unconscious. "No formalities here, Inu-san. Everyone else leave the room immediately." "Hiruzen Sarutobi, Hokage of Konoha," said with a wave of his hand. Immediately 3 shadows darted across the room and out the door. Upon shutting the door, the dog-masked Anbu stood up and walked toward the couch in the room and laid Naruto down. What would have caused him to run from the orphanage? Hiruzen said idly, taking a puff from his pipe. "I believe I have the answer to that, Hokage-sama," the Anbu started. "It seems the orphanage has found a few loopholes in your protection over Naruto. The laws prevent the overseers from harming Naruto, but we cannot enforce your law against the children. The woman in charge has been giving more food to the children who abuse Naruto. That is unacceptable," Hiruzen said, forcefully slamming his fist into his desk. He pulled out a scroll from said desk and started to write in it. A few minutes had passed and the Anbu finally spoke. "What will you do about this, Hokage-sama?" Hiruzen stood up, rolled up the scroll he had been writing in and walked around his desk toward his Anbu. "I have a mission for you should you choose to accept it. I am not forcing you to accept it, but I believe you deserve the first chance to take it." As he said this, he handed the scroll to his Anbu, who quickly read it. The mission was S-ranked. The mission said, "Protect Naruto Uzumaki from immediate threat and harm from the shadows." Length of assignment, 7 years. At all times between missions is to be spent overlooking Naruto Uzumaki's safety and well-being. Hospitalize any physical threat to Naruto without prejudice. No mercy is to be shown. Hokage-sama, I would be honored to accept this mission, however, this is calling for a 2-man team. Who would you have as my partner? Inu-san asked. "I believe that Neko-chan would be more than happy to take this mission. It also wouldn't hurt to have a woman in Naruto's life. She is also a better medic than you," Hiruzen said after a few moments of thought. Hiruzen dropped the security seals and called in an Anbu from the waiting area outside. "Please bring Neko-chan here as soon as possible." The Anbu nodded and vanished. Replacing the seal, Hiruzen continued. "There is one more thing I did not write down in that mission scroll. This will be an S-rank mission, but knowledge of the mission is to be considered just as confidential. Naruto will ask questions, I am sure, however, please do not tell him why you are protecting him. I will tell him of his mother soon, and that will be the reason for the protection. Until then, do not give a reason, am I understood? Just his mother, why not tell him about his father?" Inu asked. "That I will hold off on until he is a full-fledged shinobi. A little unfair, but I want him to mature before I tell him that. Wouldn't want him to shout it to the world now, would we?" Hiruzen said after a moment of thought. Feeling a slight fluctuation in the seals, knowing it was the equivalent to knocking, Hiruzen lowered the seals and the Anbu he sent to find Neko returned. "I have brought Neko-san as ordered, Hokage-sama," the Anbu said with a short bow. "Thank you, Kuma-san, you may go," Hiruzen said with a small nod back. "Neko-chan, I have a long-term S-rank mission for you to complete with Inu-san here," Hiruzen said as he offered her the scroll. Neko took the scroll and started to read it. When she finished, it took everything she had as an Anbu to not jump up and down in joy. "I accept, Hokage-sama. Thank you for this mission. There is only one more thing, Neko-chan. You are forbidden to tell Naruto your relationship with him, is that clear?" Hiruzen said in a voice that left no room to argue. I understand, Hokage-sama," Neko said quietly. "Do not worry, Neko-chan. I will tell him when he joins the academy at age 8. Until then, this is all I can do for you," Hiruzen said in a slightly soft voice. Thank you again, Hokage-sama, she said, bowing deeply. To go into further details, you both will be keeping an eye from the shadows. If need be, you can intervene in any mistreatment of Naruto. If someone is seen harming the boy, you're to drag them to Ibiki at once, is that understood? Getting a nod from both of them, he continued. I do not want you to baby him, however. If you feel he is sick, lead him to the hospital, or better yet, bring him here. He already sees me as a sort of grandfather figure, and I would very much like to keep it that way. He will actually accept treatment if I am with him. Neko-chan, I am sorry for this, but that means you will be his primary doctor as well. Is that alright? Neko merely nodded before Hiruzen continued. I also want you both to carry around a few of these seals, he said, pulling out a few tags. These will completely shut down any demonic chakra in Naruto if it ever becomes a problem. With these, the council has agreed to keep him completely my responsibility and are keeping their noses out of it. I would also like to keep it that way. Letting out a small sigh, the Hokage continued. Lastly, I would like a monthly report from the orphanage on any injury Naruto receives, along with how his studies are going. He will most likely be joining the academy at age 8, and I would like him to at least be able to read going in. Taking one last puff from his pipe, Hiruzen finished. This is your mission for the next 7 years. One of you will be in his shadow at all times. If one of you would care to drop him off in his bed at the orphanage, then your mission will officially begin. Best of luck, and dismissed, Hiruzen said with authority and a smile on his face. Neko reached down to pick up Naruto and take him to the orphanage. On her trip there, she realized that he was really skinny and was borderline malnourished. She would be looking into that as she listened in on Ibiki and the headmistress later that night. Naruto woke up just before the sun woke up back in the orphanage. He looked around and saw a small sandwich on his nightstand. He almost fell out of bed trying to cram the whole thing in his mouth. Naruto starting to panic when he realized that must have been another one of the kids' sandwiches. Getting ready to run away, he saw no one else was awake. Sitting back down, he tried to figure out why he was back here. I thought I got away, Naruto told himself before slumping back down. It was a few minutes later when some of the kids started waking up and walking around. Soon after, Naruto's best friend Tenten tackled him, crying into his shoulder. Where were you last night? I was so worried I thought you got kidnapped, Tenten said in between sobs. I'm sorry, Ten-chan, I got lost walking around and didn't get back until really late. Naruto lied lamely. Tenten could tell he was lying, but the look he was giving her, she just couldn't bring herself to ask what really happened. She decided to drop it and started to walk him toward the dining hall. After a few weeks of Tenten keeping a closer eye on Naruto, he finally broke down and told her that he tried to run away. Why would you run away from here, Naruto-kun? She asked. She knew that the other kids picked on him, but he always seemed to bounce back and never let it bother him. She couldn't think of a reason for him to leave. I just wanted to get away from here. Everyone is mean to me and I don't want to get beat up anymore, Naruto said, looking at the floor. But we are friends, right, Naruto-kun? Please don't run away. You are the only friend I have made here, Tenten said with tears threatening to run down her cheek. Naruto might only be 5 years old, almost 6, but he was mature enough to not like it when those precious to him were distressed. I'm sorry, Ten-chan. I shouldn't have left like that. I just couldn't take the hitting anymore. Are you still mad at me? Naruto asked, staring at the ground. Tenten really did like being around Naruto. He was really nice and fun to play with. She also didn't really have anyone else she could call her friend. No, I just wish you would have talked to me about all this sooner. I didn't know half of what everyone was doing to you, she told him, looking at the floor with him. Can we just go play? I can't sit still this long, Naruto said, hopping to his feet and offering his hand to Tenten. Sure, let's go, Tenten said, grabbing his hand and standing up. When she got up, Naruto didn't let go and began running with her to the playground. Tenten blushed just a little bit. No one had ever held her hand before and she was glad it was Naruto. Their playtime was short-lived, however. After keeping an eye on the swing set for a few minutes, a swing finally became available. Naruto offered it to Tenten and he pushed her on it. Tenten had a smile on her face that could have blinded made a guy. His smile was quickly ruined when a large rock struck her in the head. After getting hit, she fell out of the swing and landed on her back. Her head bounced off the ground and a small amount of blood pooled behind her head and she wasn't moving. Tenten, Naruto screamed, rushing over to her. He saw the blood and started to panic. He didn't know what to do, so he started looking around furiously for an adult. He didn't find any around and started to yell for help. He spotted a group of boys a few yards away laughing, and one of them were juggling a rock. Naruto realized this boy probably threw the rock at Tenten just as he threw the second one. Naruto threw himself in the path of it, getting hit in the chest but protecting Tenten. One of the boys laughed at him for protecting such a stupid girl. The three boys starting to approach Naruto. Two of them had sticks and the third threw another rock. This rock hit Naruto in the head and he started to bleed into his eye. The boys surrounded him and Tenten, and one poked Naruto with his stick and the other boy tried to swing at Tenten's face. Naruto dove over her and covered her face with his body. Now isn't this sweet? This idiot is protecting the other idiot. It must be spreading. As he finished, he swung and hit Naruto again and again. Naruto wanted to protect Tenten and would not leave her no matter what. It was when one last hit to the head made Naruto's arms give out and he collapsed that he heard a faint yell in his head. "To damn pathetic Gaki, stand and fight." After hearing these words, Naruto couldn't feel the pain anymore. His eyes snapped open and all he could see was red. A boy had just kicked him in the side and pushed him off of Tenten and was about to hit her when he lost it. Neiko was in the office with the headmistress of the orphanage while this was happening. She was gathering her report on Naruto's wellness and education just like she did at the end of every month. As always, Naruto had been in good health. The fox made sure of that. What bothered Neiko was that he was falling behind in his studies. According to the headmistress, Naruto constantly fell asleep during lessons. Neiko had peeked in a few times and, yes, he fell asleep often. She would tell the Hokage, but other than that wouldn't be able to do anything. She was just about to finish up when she felt it. The nine-tailed fox. It had been a few years, but she knew that feeling. She sprinted out the door and rushed toward the feeling. Both her and Inu had been given a few demonic chakra seals by the Hokage. She needed to get there fast before anyone else made it. Last thing, she wanted to see what Naruto killed by a trigger-happy Chunin. Naruto, after seeing the stick descending on Tenten, he jumped up and grabbed it. With the fox's chakra running through him, he shattered the stick on contact. He rammed the jagged stick through the boy's shoulder and turned to the other two. The boy that had the other stick dropped it and fainted. The other boy managed to yell and throw the rock in his hand at Naruto. He caught it and threw it back with enough force to shatter upon contact with his head. The shards of the rock dug into the boy's eye and destroyed it completely. He made it 3 steps backwards before Naruto was upon him again, slashing at his face with his claws. Neiko saw Naruto glowing with a faint red glow and saw him tackle the third boy. She flashed to his side and grabbed his wrist and slapped the seal to his forehead. Naruto went limp in her arms and she laid him on his back. After checking him over with Shozen Jutsu, he started to come back to the point he could understand what was going on. His eyes snapped open and he shot straight up and looked at Tenten before screaming for her. He managed to crawl to her before Neiko put a hand on his shoulder, telling her that she would be okay. Naruto looked at her and started to cry before plopping his head into her lap, thanking her until he passed back out. Stroking his hair affectionately, she laid him down on the ground and finished the healing of Tenten and stabilizing the other boys. It was then that a squad of Anbu led by the Hokage dropped and surrounded them. "Neiko-chan, what is everyone's condition?" the Hokage asked with authority. Naruto is stable and suffered severe bruising along his back and ribs along with a mild concussion. This girl has a concussion as well and lost a lot of blood for such a small wound. These boys, this one went into shock with the hole in his arm. He is fairly stable now but needs to be rushed to the hospital. This boy just fainted, he is fine. However, this boy is still critical. His skull has a small fracture just above his left eye. The left eye is completely gone. I stopped the bleeding that I could, but if he doesn't get to the hospital in a few moments he will most likely die. I am a combat medic, not a surgeon, Hokage-sama. Nodding grimly, he ordered his Anbu to transport everyone but Naruto to the hospital. Neiko scooped up Naruto and started heading to the Hokage Tower with Hiruzen. Entering the office, Hiruzen showed visible worry before activating the security seals. "He will be alright, right Neiko-chan?" Hiruzen asked with heartbreak all over his voice. "Of course, Hokage-sama. I deeply regret failing my mission. I was lost in thought over Naruto's monthly report that I let my guard down." Neiko bowed deeply. her voice nearly cracking with guilt as he glanced at Naruto. Humans are not perfect, Neko-chan. You were able to prevent the worst of it at least. The council will be throwing a fit after this, however. I fear they will call for the boy's head. I really do not wish to find a new council. After saying this, Hiruzen sat in his chair roughly and pulled out a bottle of sake and 2 cups from a compartment in his desk. Motioning Neko over, he began to pour. I could really use some of this, and drinking alone is never quite as fun. Hiruzen said, taking a drink. Neko followed suit and was shocked at the quality. Is this from Jiraiya-sama? Neko asked, obviously shocked. Hiruzen just chuckled and nodded. He didn't share often, but now was one of those times. It was a quiet hour between Neko and Hiruzen before Naruto awoke in a panic. Shooting up from the couch, shouting out for Tenten. He made it 2 steps before he wobbled and fell to his knees and vomited in the middle of Hiruzen's office. Neko rushed to his aid and sat him down, running her Shosen just you over his head. He started to relax soon, with Neko telling him that Tenten is in the hospital getting treatment and would make a full recovery. After calming down, Naruto finally realized where he was. He turned around and saw Hiruzen smiling at him. He tilted his head down a little before saying, I'm sorry about puking on your floor, Gigi. I didn't mean to, honest. Hiruzen chuckled softly at Naruto's apology. It's nothing, Naruto, just take it easy and try to feel better. I understand you stood up to some bullies and took quite the beating. Mind telling me what happened? After Naruto told the story, how he tried to protect Tenten and started seeing red before he fainted. Hiruzen sent him to stay the night with Neko. He thought long and hard on it and decided he would have to get the seal checked by Jiraiya, and soon. He did not think the seal was weakened. He knew the jutsu that was used to make it, and he couldn't imagine it breaking. However, a second opinion would probably be needed. The council would definitely call for blood if he didn't. Before heading to bed, he left a clone to read over as many laws regarding orphans as he could. Making a note of it as he went, he would need all the info if he was to deal with the council in the morning. Morning came way too early for Hiruzen as he gathered the council. His headache was already a mile wide and the meeting hadn't started yet. What have you called us for this early, Hokage-sama? A civilian council member in their early 30s said first. I am sure that some of you felt the disturbances that occurred late yesterday afternoon. Several of the shinobi council members nodded, and he continued. Naruto Uzumaki and his friend Tenten were attacked by 3 boys in the playground yesterday. Are you telling me this meeting is about a playground brawl? What are we wasting our time here for? Another young civilian council member asked. Hiruzen spiked some killer intent and slammed his fist on the table. You know why this is important, and yet you think it is of no concern. Get the hell out of here. You are obviously not qualified to be on this council if you do not understand the problem at hand here. The Hokage shouted at the councilman. The councilman was shaking and tried to open his mouth to reply, but before he could, he found a kunai impaled into the table in front of him. Now, Hiruzen yelled at him. After the councilman stumbled out of the chamber and the seals were replaced, the meeting continued. Hiruzen was already happy with its progress. Getting rid of a member of the civilian side put numbers with the shinobi. As I was saying, Hiruzen started. Naruto and his friend were attacked by 3 young boys. All from the same orphanage. When the headmistress was questioned, she revealed that she had told the kids to harass young Tenten. Because she did not tell them to attack Naruto directly, she was not beheaded where she stood, as instead serving out a life sentence for child abuse. This leads me to the purpose of this meeting. There is now an orphanage without a headmistress. This leaves 36 children without a home. Other orphanages within the village are exceeding max capacity as well. I will ask everyone within the council if they or anyone they know would be able to take over the orphanage or even adopt some of these children. The civilian council just stood there and waited. There were some murmurs between the shinobi council about members that would be willing to adopt. Shikaku, Choza and Inoichi all agreed that there would be couples within their respective clans that would be willing to adopt. They would also call a few members to oversee the orphanage for the moment. There leaves only one last thing to address then. Hiruzen said with a sigh. During the attack on his person, Naruto has tapped into the 9-tailed fox's chakra to protect his friend Tenten. The council quickly turned into chaos on the civilian side. Silence! Hiruzen shouted, getting everyone to shut up. Inoichi, I would like to ask you to take a look at Naruto's mind and make sure he is not influenced by the fox. Is that acceptable? Hiruzen asked kindly. Is the seal still fully intact, Hokage-sama? Inoichi asked. To my eye it is still in perfect condition. However, I have recalled Jiraiya to come back to the village within the week. He will be double-checking the seal. Hiruzen said. With your permission, Hokage-sama, I would highly prefer to wait until Jiraiya checks the seal before I dive into Naruto's mind. I will however begin simple therapy as soon as you wish, replied Inoichi after a moment of thought. This is acceptable, Inoichi, and thank you. I would like to have you meet with Naruto later today. He is still resting at this time and I will call for you when he is up for it. Nodding, Inoichi accepted. You cannot be serious, Hokage-sama. This demon just attacked and nearly killed 3 civilian children. It is obvious that the Kyuubi is beginning to slip through the seal and the boy must be executed at once. The councilwoman representing the civilian schooling system yelled. Hiruzen sighed. Civilians really did not know anything about the shinobi arts. I understand why you would think that, but this is a matter concerning shinobi affairs and the civilian council was not called for this part of the discussion. I had hoped that the civilian council would have insight to help resolve the orphanage problem, but, again, my shinobi council has already solved that problem. If that was all you had to say, then shut up and listen before I eject you all and change this from a council meeting to a clan head meeting. He is a civilian, therefore we reserve our right to be involved in this matter. An older councilwoman said with a grin that showed she thought she won. Hiruzen merely stated that due to a law that the second Hokage put into effect before his death, any orphan that happens to be heir to a clan with no other surviving members will be seen as clan head before he is seen as a charge of the village. Therefore, Naruto is already officially the head of a shinobi clan and not a mere civilian. Upon reaching the rank of genin, he would be allowed to receive inheritance and sit in on the council if he so chose to. And after reaching the age of 18 or reaching Chunin, he would be allowed to vote on council matters and be encouraged to produce an heir by any means. Clan Restoration Act, Hiruzen sighed inwardly. I hope Naruto doesn't hate me for being forced to enforce this law when becomes of age. He pushed those thoughts aside as the head of the Uchiha clan spoke up. Hokage-sama, I believe with these recent events that Naruto should be kept under tabs at all times. I believe the Uchiha clan is the best to undertake this task. It is said that our Sharingan was able to assist the first Hokage in capturing the beast in the first place. He said with a smirk. Yes, you do have a fair point. I know you wished to adopt Naruto at an early age, but that was not possible. If memory serves, there was a rather talented Uchiha that was preparing to join the Anbu a few weeks back, correct? Hiruzen asked, looking deep in thought. Fugaku smiled inwardly. Itachi would be perfect to get the brat on their side. Yes, Itachi would make for a great Anbu to keep an eye on the boy. Hiruzen chuckled inwardly. He had already spoken to Itachi and knew he was one of the most loyal people he had at his disposal. You misunderstand, I would like for Itachi-kun just to socialize with Naruto. He would be in a position to assist Naruto far more than if he were an Anbu. I feel that having someone show Naruto any form of kindness would do wonders in keeping his emotions in check. Another strong suit for Itachi-kun. He will also be assisting from the shadows, but for now I think he should have a face. During this long-term mission I also believe that Itachi-kun can be training to fill the role of Anbu captain within a few more years. Keeping him close to Naruto will give him all the time to train that he could need. Slightly annoyed that he couldn't get the fox under his control before they betrayed the village, the Uchiha clan had accepted the plan and would send Itachi to the Hokage that night for his mission. With all of their business taken care of and everyone more or less happy about the outcome, everyone left the chambers. Hiruzen had thought hard about having Itachi become close to Naruto. Before he was to join the Anbu, Itachi had told the Hokage about a potential betrayal by the Uchiha clan. It was still a long ways away, but the threat was there. With that, Itachi became a double agent for the Hokage, with the impending Anbu promotion being a good thing to the Uchiha clan with potential gains in information from it. Itachi was loyal only to the village, however, and it backfired. He would have a lot to think about tomorrow and would have to update Inu and Neko. There was the meeting with Inoichi later that day as well. It was already a long day and it was only going to get longer. Naruto awoke in a strange place. It looked like a home. He pinched himself in the arm and winced. He looked at his arm and saw it was covered in bandages. He could remember talking to the Hokage about what happened at the playground. That's right, I was hurt pretty bad. He barely got the thought through his head and cried out, Tenten. He barely got the name out of his mouth before a female Anbu wearing a Neko mask rushed into the room. Naruto-kun, are you alright? She asked with just the slightest hint of worry. Not that Naruto would notice. Yes, thank you very much. Where am I? Naruto asked. You are currently at my home. Hokage-sama asked me to let you rest here a little and keep an eye on your injuries. Speaking of, let me give you a quick checkup. Neko said in a soft, non-threatening voice. She knew he didn't like doctors and didn't want to scare him off. He still flinched but sat down and didn't run away. Finishing up his checkup, Neko asked him if he was hungry. Naruto's eyes lit up instantly. Yes, I'm very hungry. Naruto blurted out. Naruto thought about it for a second, remembering the Hokage telling him to always thank anyone who showed him such kindness. He bowed slightly, thank you. Neko almost flinched. His attitude did a complete 180. He showed manners but was really eager to eat. That sort of attitude was a sign of starvation. She ignored it for now. Inoichi would check him out in a short while anyway. Neko, after realizing she had paused for a second, said, No problem Naruto-kun, I'll go fix something for lunch. Your clothes are on top of the dresser, get dressed. Hokage-sama was wanting to see you again when you were ready. In the kitchen, Neko threw together a quick sandwich. She really didn't want to make the Hokage wait, and she really didn't know how to cook anything else. She trained to be a shinobi, not a cook after all. She was shaken out of her thoughts when Naruto entered the room and watched her bring the food to the table. Is that drool? Neko thought, watching him start the sandwiches down. Thank you so much for lunch, Neko Oni-chan. Naruto almost shouted before taking a bite of the sandwich in front of him. Neko smiled behind her mask. She was still just 15 years old, and she had to admit, it had been a while since anyone had given her such an affectionate nickname. After a quick lunch, Neko and Naruto made their way to the Hokage Tower. Upon reaching the tower and finally getting to see the Hokage, Neko and Naruto both stood before him. Hiruzen could see at a glance Naruto was in much better health than last night. Before they started talking, the Hokage signaled to an Anbu hidden in the wall. He pulled out a small scroll and handed it to him before whispering something in his ear. Nodding, the Anbu vanished to carry out his orders. Neko had a hunch what he went to do but remained silent. Naruto, however, thought that was so cool how he just vanished like that. After Naruto settled down a bit, they discussed yesterday's events a little more clearly. Naruto talked about Tenten-chan quite affectionately, a detail that neither Hiruzen or Neko passed over. After a little teasing by the Hokage about Naruto's girlfriend, which Naruto denied, Hiruzen felt someone disturb the seal. He lowered it and heard a knock on the door. As the door opened, Inoichi Yamanaka entered. Good afternoon, Hokage-sama, Inoichi said with a small bow. Good afternoon, Inoichi-san, thank you for getting here in such a timely manner. I trust you read my note. Hiruzen said with a smile. Of course, Hokage-sama, Inoichi replied. Well, I would say now is as good a time as any. Naruto-kun, this is Inoichi Yamanaka. He is the head of the Yamanaka clan. They specialize in the workings of the mind. I asked him if he could talk to you about yesterday. Hiruzen said with a smile. Naruto cocked his head to the side with a confused look on his face. I don't understand, Gigi, why did you want us to talk? Well, Naruto, when you and Tenten-san were attacked by kids from the orphanage, I was worried you wouldn't be able to go back. I wanted Inoichi here to see be a second opinion if you would suffer from anything long-term from your attack. It is common after all. Hiruzen said smoothly. He couldn't tell Naruto the whole truth even if he wanted to. Naruto still looked confused but nodded anyway. Inoichi introduced himself and just chatted with Naruto for a short while before asking any questions about what happened. Naruto averted his eyes to the Hokage and Neko a few times when Inoichi hit a sore spot in his past. Seeing this, Inoichi went over to the Hokage's desk and dropped him a small note in front of him. The note simply said, possible distrust of strangers and reliance on familiar faces to be able to adapt to new social interactions. I would like to test this, but it would require you and Neko-san to leave the room for a few minutes. Neko-san can stay in the wall and watch as well in case he panics. I believe this to be unhealthy but fixable while he is still this young. Hiruzen nodded and stood up. Neko-chan, could you accompany me for a moment? I need go over a few things. Hiruzen said. Of course Hokage-sama. Neko replied, standing up as well. They both walked out the door and closed it behind them. Inoichi took a sip of water and got back to talking with Naruto. The change was almost night and day. The door closing caused Naruto to noticeably flinch. His eyes also seemed to widen a bit. Inoichi cringed internal. The orphanage must be terrible if he responds this bad to a one-on-one confrontation with someone he has known for almost an hour now. Inoichi tried to continue with the conversation, but Naruto was showing signs of fear and distrust. Without a constant in his life, he may recede further into his shell. That Tenten girl must be important to him if he can handle an orphanage full of people without cracking. Inoichi thought with a sense of dread. This just turned into months of therapy instead of weeks. Not that he minded, of course, he liked Naruto after all. He was a very honest kid with a good sense of right and wrong. He just had to figure out how he could get him to at least get people to arm's reach without knowing them for months. It was a moment later when the Hokage and Neko returned. Naruto instantly settled down a little, revealing that he was sitting very rigidly while they were gone. The Hokage felt his heart break a little at that. He didn't want to cause Naruto any pain, and that is exactly what he had just done. Neko had to resist the urge to run over to him and make sure he was all right. She wasn't going to let someone who saw her as an older sister suffer. Inoichi turned and nodded grimly at the Hokage. Hiruzen knew exactly what it meant and nodded back before taking his seat back at his desk. The sun was just starting to set and Naruto looked absolutely ragged. Hiruzen understood the seriousness of the situation, and Inoichi was the best person to solve it. He just couldn't stand it anymore today. Hiruzen stood up and stretched a little bit. It is getting a little late, Naruto-kun, would you like to go out and get something to eat? Hiruzen said with a smile. Naruto felt all of the tiredness wash away and jumped up. Yata, you know it, Gigi. Can we go to Ichiraku's? Naruto asked with excitement in his voice. Of course Naruto-kun. Neko-chan, Inoichi-san, if you would like to join us, I will pick up the bill. Hiruzen said, motioning toward the door. Thank you very much Hokage-sama. That sounds great. Neko and Inoichi both said with a small bow. Naruto practically yelled, then let's go. Before he started skipping down the hall singing about ramen. Dinner at Ichiraku's was fairly quiet. Ayame was worried about Naruto and his bandages. He got her to calm down and managed to get down a few large bowls of ramen before Inoichi said he should really be getting back home. I will have a full report on your desk first thing tomorrow morning Hokage-sama. Inoichi said quiet enough that Naruto wouldn't hear him. Hiruzen nodded and sent him on his way. Back in the restaurant Naruto realized something was missing. It took him a moment but it finally hit him like a brick to the head. Gigi, can we go visit Tenten-chan? Naruto asked with worry all over his voice. Hiruzen thought it over. It wasn't too late yet but he needed to get back to his paperwork. Neko-chan, would you mind taking Naruto-kun to see Tenten in the hospital? Hiruzen asked politely. Of course Hokage-sama, we should hurry though Naruto-kun. We wouldn't want to keep her up all night after all. Neko said, getting up from her stool and heading toward the exit. See you all later, thanks for dinner Gigi. Naruto said with a wide smile. Hiruzen chuckled and waved goodbye as Naruto ran to catch up to Neko. Hiruzen turned back to Teuchi and said, here is a little extra. Next time you see Naruto walk by give him a free bowl of ramen for me. Just say it's on the house. Teuchi took the money and bowed to him. Thank you for the continued support. The Gaki is a good kid and I gotta say, seeing him so skinny breaks my heart. Hiruzen nodded grimly. He knew it as well. Upon reaching the hospital, Neko approached the front desk with Naruto hiding behind her. He hated the hospitals, ever since they hurt him worse than he was when he entered. He gave a slight shudder at that thought. I am looking for a young girl named Tenten, could you point me toward her room? Neko asked in a soft voice. The nurse behind the front desk nodded before checking for the information. Yes, she is in room 210. She is awake and can accept visitors. However, visiting hours are going to be up soon. Please make it a short visit Anbu-san. Of course, thank you. Come on Naruto-kun, let's go. Neko said while walking toward the staircase heading to the second floor. Anbu-san. The Gaki you got following you is not allowed in here. The receptionist said with venom dripping from her voice. Turning to stare the woman down, Neko saw the pure hate in her eyes. And why is that? Naoko asked, the threatening tone very noticeable to the poor woman. The receptionist gulped. He is a menace and his kind will not. That is as far as she got before Naoko slammed her fist on the desk. That is not your call to make. This hospital was founded by the Senju clan and in the absence of Lady Tsunade, Hokage-sama has been charged with its upkeep. You will be silent and get the notion that you can turn away anyone you want out of your head, or I will see to it that you find an early and permanent retirement. Do you understand? Naoko said with promises of pain and suffering all over her voice. The woman behind the desk's legs started to wobble and she then peed herself from the pure killing intent Naoko was leaking. Naoko turned around and softly said to Naruto, "Well then, shall we go see your Tenten-chan?" she said in a slightly teasing tone. Naruto was too dumbstruck to say anything and just nodded. Entering the room and seeing Tenten looking tired nearly broke Naruto's heart. I should have protected her better, Naruto thought with his head starting to stare at the floor. Naoko saw this and guessed what was going through his head. She gave him a slight nudge and coughed, getting Tenten's attention. "How are you feeling, Tenten-chan?" Naruto asked quietly. Tenten stared at him in shock for a moment. "Naruto-kun, what happened to you?" Tenten asked with a lot of shock in her voice. Naruto flinched. Tenten sounded angry at him and he didn't want to cause her to worry. I got beat up. It's okay though, I'm fine, honest," Naruto said, although not very believably. "Naruto-kun," Tenten started, finally noticing the Anbu staring at her. "Why are you being escorted by an Anbu? Did you get in trouble?" "Ah, nothing like that, Tenten-san. I was just the first one to respond to you and Naruto-kun being attacked. Hokage-sama asked me to make sure he doesn't get in any more trouble today," Naoko said evenly. Tenten wasn't sure. The leader of the village asked one of the highest-ranked ninja to watch Naruto after a playground fight. Seemed fishy, but she was too grateful for her protecting Naruto to say anything. Naoko idly glanced at Tenten's chart while her and Naruto chatted. She certainly got a nice bump on the head, but why wasn't she released this morning? Everything points to her having made a full recovery after treatment last night. I understand keeping her overnight, but 2 days for the possibility of a minor concussion. Something doesn't seem right here. After a few moments, Naruto and Tenten got quiet for a moment. Naoko decided to just ask Tenten what the doctors told her about staying another night. "Well, the nurse told me that I was ready to go home today. A bit later a doctor came in and said that they were waiting on one more test and it might take a while. After about an hour he came back and said that the results were bad and that I would have to stay again," Tenten said, kind of worried. "That just confuses me further. The nurse would have had to get the doctor to sign off on her release forms. No matter how I look at it, they are keeping her for no reasons. The tests they were waiting for was a blood test. It was completely irrelevant to her condition," Naoko thought. She wanted to talk to the doctor about this obvious malpractice. She looked down and checked the name of the doctor before heading toward the door. "I am going to go talk to the doctor. If the nurse said you were ready to be released, you shouldn't be stuck in here," Naoko said as he left the room. Naruto and Tenten just looked at each other as she left. Naruto explained that she was a doctor too and if she thought it was weird, it was weird. Marching through the hospital, back to the front desk, Naoko was deep in thought. There is something going on or this hospital needs some new, competent doctors. She made it to the desk to find a new receptionist sitting there. "What can I help you with, Anbu-san?" the receptionist asked. "I'm looking for Dr. Morrow, have you seen him?" Naoko asked, trying to sound as friendly as she could. "Dr. Morrow might still be in his office. Head down the hallway here, you will see his nameplate. Can you tell him to come up front after you talk to him?" the receptionist asked. At least this girl is professional, Naoko thought. Sure thing. As she walked toward Morrow's office, she really didn't know exactly what she was going to say to him. She thought he was a quack at this point but really did not have any proof. Naoko couldn't really figure out why this was getting her so worked up. Must have been the oath that took when she took some field medic training. When she finally got to his office, she noticed the door was open, the light was on, and he was nowhere to be seen. Shrugging, she turned back to the receptionist. Upon her arrival, the receptionist thanked her for telling Dr. Morrow to come up front. "I didn't see Dr. Morrow. He wasn't in his office," Naoko explained. "That's odd, he said he saw you before he headed upstairs," the nurse explained, shrugging and looking back at her paperwork. Naoko decided to just head back to Tenten's room and keep an eye out for Maro. She got to the bottom of the stairs before she heard a scream. Back in the room, Tenten and Naruto talked a bit more about what they were going to do when she got out. Naruto said he would ask Gigi for some money to go get her some real food at Ichiraku's. This got Tenten to smile, and it made Naruto feel like the sun was upon him. It was a few moments later that the door opened. "Welcome back, Naoko." "Oh, sorry doctor, I thought you were Naoko," Naruto said as he saw the doctor come in. "Doctor, can I go back home? I feel fine," Tenten asked. "Sorry dear, but you needed to stay put," the doctor replied with a lopsided grin. "I don't understand, what do you mean?" Tenten asked with a bit of concern on her face. The doctor began to chuckle darkly. Naruto took a step backwards. He felt like this doctor was glaring holes in him. "You are close to this demon after all. It worked out well giving him a chance to visit," the doctor said, full on laughing at this point. Naruto took a step toward Tenten and put himself in between her and the mad doctor. The doctor pulled out a knife and Tenten screamed as loud as she could. Naoko heard the scream and sprinted up the stairs and kicked in the door. What she saw was Dr. Maro with a knife in Naruto's chest, pushing him against the wall. Tenten was trying to scratch his eyes out, but the mont's left arm kept her at bay. Naoko did not hesitate. In one swift movement she unsheathed her sword and lopped the mont's right arm off at the shoulder. She grabbed him by the head and threw him backwards into the opposite wall. She dropped her sword and rushed to Naruto's aid. He had a 6-inch knife buried up to the handle in his chest. She knew at a glance it missed his heart. She threw a large smoke bomb out the window and detonated it, in hopes it would draw some more Anbu and hopefully another Anbu medic. Tenten was a wreck. She realized that she was used as bait to get to Naruto. She cried and screamed for Naruto. She saw him slowly falling asleep. Her young mind couldn't take the stress of what was happening and she fainted. Naoko was relieved when she fainted. It would make it a lot easier to focus. She had to keep Naruto awake at all costs. With this severe of an injury, if he passed out the fox might try to take over. "Naruto-kun, stay awake, you have to stay awake," she said frantically. She had removed the knife and began repairing what she could. It was going to be close but he would survive. He would be sore in the morning though. Just when she had gotten him stabilized to the point his life was no longer in immediate danger, he blacked out. Moments later Itachi Uchiha came through the window. With a small bow he asked, "Naoko-san, is there any way I can be of assistance?" Naoko turned and looked at Itachi. The Hokage had already told her that he would be assisting watching Naruto, so she trusted him. "Just get that trash over there to Ibiki-san as fast as you can. He will most likely bleed out soon. Just burn the stump closed. Ibiki-san can handle it from there." Nodding, Itachi made 2 shadow clones and held the man still. He channeled fire chakra into his hand and closed it around the stump. After completely burning the stump closed, the clones picked him up and carried him out the window toward T&I. "Is anyone else coming, Itachi-san?" Naoko asked. "Yes, I sent a clone to Hokage-sama's home and to the Anbu headquarters. A squad of Anbu left 2 minutes ago and should be here in just a second." Hokage-sama just walked out his front door, Itachi said with a nod. "Thank you for that. I'm glad someone saw the smoke at least," Naoko said. "Also fortunate we are in the hospital," she said as she finished stitching the hole in Naruto's chest closed. Naoko took a few deep breaths and walked over to Tenten. Giving her a quick once-over, she confirmed she just fainted and was fine. She sat down and waited for the Anbu and the Hokage to arrive. After the Hokage arrived, he ordered the Anbu to search Maro's office for anything relating to the assassination attempt. Coming up empty, they were called off. After a few moments of silence, Naoko spoke up. "Hokage-sama, I feel the hospital's security has been completely compromised. Naruto-kun is no longer safe here. With your permission, I would have him stay at my home until he is physically fit," Naoko said with a little worry in her tone. "Yes, that would probably be for the best. While the shinobi medic Nin have enough common sense to not try and kill the boy, we have to investigate everyone now. Itachi-kun, please go with her and keep an eye out tonight. Report back to me in the morning with an update on Naruto-kun's health." Hiruzen said after a moment. Itachi nodded and agreed. "Should we also watch over this girl, Hokage-sama?" Itachi asked. Hiruzen looked to Naoko with a questioning look. Neko sighed, "It will not be a problem, Hokage-sama. Thank you, Neko-chan," Hiruzen said as he stood up to head back home. "Keep all of this under wraps for now. I will see Ibiki in the morning and we will go from there." Hiruzen finished and walked out the door. After a short walk with their charges in their arms, Neko and Itachi made it to Neko's apartment. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a simple one-bedroom apartment with an empty spare room turned into a guest bedroom. Neko sat Naruto down into the couch and walked to hallway closet. She pulled out 2 futons and laid them out in the spare room. Itachi laid Tenten down into the futon, still in her hospital gown, and pulled the covers over her. Walking back toward the living room, he saw Neko changing Naruto's bandages. Itachi looked at him with indifference. He could see the obvious signs of malnourishment, but it was not his place to say anything. He would mention it in his report, but nothing more was needed. Neko, however, was completely disgusted. When she first repaired the damage to his chest, she was in such a hurry she didn't get that good of a look at him. Now, without bandages, no life or death situations, all she could see was skin and bones. No wonder he couldn't focus in the orphanage classrooms. It had to take constant effort to even stay awake. Something else to add to my report, Neko thought. Itachi-san, could you have a clone run a quick delivery for me? Neko asked as she started to write down a short note. The Akamichi family clan head should be home at this time, so shouldn't be a problem. Itachi said in a flat voice. How did you know I was going to send you there? Neko asked, her voice betraying the slight amount of shock. Your body language while examining Naruto-san suggested that you were disgusted with his current state of malnourishment. From that I assumed you would ask me to retrieve a remedy from the Akamichi family. It is also only logical to go to the clan head with regards to Naruto-san, as he knows fully of his importance to the village. Itachi replied in a simple, calculating voice. Yes, I would ask of them for something to help with malnourishment. Please just pass this on to the clan head and bring back whatever they recommend. If necessary, just tell them who it is for. Neko said with just the slightest amount of authority. It will be done, Itachi said as he made a clone to carry out the task. It was a few hours later, late into the night, when Naruto finally awoke. Sitting up, Naruto looked around for a moment before realizing he was back at Neko's home. I keep winding up here, don't I? Naruto idly thought as he stood up, with a little effort. I'm alive. How am I alive? He thought until he looked at his bandaged chest. Duh, Neko healed me. I should go thank her again. With this thought, Naruto walked to the door that led to the living room. Before he opened it, he heard giggling. Sounds like Tenten-chan, Naruto thought before he paused a little longer. As he listened in, he came to a few conclusions. Tenten was truly the best friend a boy could ever hope for. Neko seemed like she really did think of him as a younger brother. Lastly, whoever the other guy in the room was, he really didn't talk much. Before Naruto had time to think much more on it, the door was opened by Neko. Naruto-kun, you really shouldn't be moving around yet. You were stabbed in the chest for crying out loud, Neko said, using her best scolding voice she could. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Sorry Neko Oni-chan, I kind of forgot. You're so good of a medic it didn't hurt anymore. Naruto said with the brightest smile he could muster. Neko sighed in defeat. It was impossible to stay mad at him. He was just too innocent after all. It's all right Naruto-kun, just please, if you get hurt again, wait for the doctor's permission before you start moving around. She said. I forgot, Naruto started before bowing a little. Thank you for healing me again, Neko Oni-chan. Well come on, your little Tenten-chan has been worried sick about you. Neko said with a slightly teasing tone. Naruto followed, although a little red in the cheeks. As Naruto came into the living room, Tenten shot up and charged straight at him, looking to hug him. Naruto-kun, you are okay. She practically yelled as she ran. Before she could glomp him, Itachi stood up and grabbed her shirt. Neko had given her a large t-shirt. You should be careful, you don't reopen his wounds Tenten-san. Itachi said flatly. Yes, sorry, okay. Tenten said quickly, trying to wiggle out of Itachi's grasp. Itachi released her and she ran to stand right in front of Naruto. Tears started to roll down her face as she tried to speak. Why didn't you run away? Tenten stammered out. Naruto didn't understand. What do you mean Tenten-chan? There was a crazy doctor guy with a knife. Was I supposed to try and run away and leave you behind? Naruto said. Tenten had no idea how to reply to that. She had thought he was stupid for not running. It completely slipped her mind that he was wanting to protect her. Sorry, Tenten whispered. Don't be. It was just the first thing that came to mind. I didn't really think about running. Naruto whispered back. With their conversation coming to an end, Neiko decided she should talk. Naruto-kun, you should eat something. You have been unconscious for most of the night. After throwing together a quick meal, everyone sat down to eat. Most of the conversation was just trying to talk out the shock of someone trying to assassinate Naruto. At the end of the meal, however, Neiko pulled out a small green pill. Naruto-kun, I need you to swallow this pill for me. Neiko said as gently as she could. Sure one-chan. Naruto said, taking the pill. Naruto swallowed the pill and Neiko was actually a little surprised. With how much he hated doctors, I assumed getting him to take medicine would be impossible. He must really trust me. It took a few minutes, but the pill finally started to get to work. Oni-chan, I feel a little funny. Naruto said as he grabbed his stomach. Deciding it was the pill, but still wanting to show that she would be there to assist, she walked over to him and started to check him over. Yes, Naruto-kun, it is the pill starting to work. She said softly, pausing to try and get the right words out. You are malnourished, Naruto-kun. The pill will repair your body, but it will take time. You are going to have to take one a day for at least a month. She said. Oni-chan, what's malnourished mean? Naruto said, after he barely understood what Neiko was talking about. Right, malnourished means you haven't been eating right. It will make you weaker when you grow up. That is what the pill is for. It should start to repair your body so you will grow up big and strong. Neiko said in an almost motherly voice. Naruto understood the part of the pill making him big and strong. He still didn't understand malnourished, but the way he looked at it, Neiko was looking out for him with the pills. Thank you again, Neiko Oni-chan. You have helped me so much. Is there any way I can repay you? Naruto said with a bow. How the hell does he keep doing that? Neiko thought in shock. One moment I feel like I am trying to get a kid to take his medicine. The next it feels like I just saved a full-grown man's life. More for the report, I suppose. Don't mention it, Naruto-kun. Neiko said rather lamely. After a little more idle chatting, Tenten and Naruto started to fall asleep. Leading them back to the guest bedroom, Neiko saw them to sleep. Returning to the living room, she sat across from Itachi. Well, Itachi-san, what are your thoughts on this? I cannot care for him 24/7 like this. There is also not an orphanage that can accept him anymore. Neiko said, a little downcast. His ability to adapt to any form of stress is astounding. Add that with how mature he is capable of showing without any form of ninja training. I would advise an apartment to be set aside for him. There are laws in place for such an occasion, and it would make it slightly easier to keep in close contact without seeming suspicious. Itachi replied in a calculating tone. Itachi truly is a phenomenal shinobi. I have been thinking this over for weeks and he comes up with a better idea within hours. Neiko thought, staring at Itachi. I will put the suggestion in my report. The next problem would be, what do we do with Tenten? If we toss her back to an orphanage, the civilians may still go after her to hurt Naruto-kun. If she is adopted into a civilian family, Naruto-kun would never be able to see her again. Even if she goes to a ninja family, odds are slim. That could cause him enough emotional turmoil to commit suicide and render the seal void. Neiko said grimly. Itachi knew of the fox. It was part of his mission after all. While he did not know what would happen if Naruto killed himself, he knew that if Tenten was killed, the odds of the fox being set free were very high. At this point in time, the safety of both should be preserved. Both may become targets, so separation at this time would be unwise. Itachi said, pondering any other solutions in his head. Both quieted down, thinking hard on what to do. They both shared similar views on how to keep Naruto safe, so there was no conflict of interests there. They both pulled out scrolls and began writing their reports for the Hokage in the morning. Upon completion, they decided one of them should stay awake in case anything went on. Neiko slept first before letting Itachi catch a little sleep himself. As morning rolled around, both Neiko and Itachi were awake with the rising of the sun. They both agreed that both kids would be asleep for some time still. They, however, could not decide how they would go to report to the Hokage. We cannot leave them here alone. Neiko started before Itachi cut her off. There is no need anymore. Itachi replied, heading toward the door. Opening the door before a knock could be heard, Itachi revealed Inu standing there sheepishly. Neko-chan and Itachi-san, you are to both turn in your reports at once. I will stay behind for the mission, Inu said, letting himself in. Inu Taiko, with that everything is sorted out, thank you for your timely arrival, Neko said with a hint of amusement in her voice. Let us be off then, Itachi said before heading to the rooftops toward the Hokage Tower. Neko let out a barely audible sigh before following suit. Inu looked around a bit and found Naruto and Tenten asleep in the guest bedroom. They both seemed at peace, at least that was a good sign. Deciding they were fine, he headed back toward the living room before the scent of coffee caught his attention. Grabbing a cup, he sat down in the living room and pulled out his favorite orange book. It was only a few minutes that Neko and Itachi arrived at the Hokage Tower. Taking a seat in the waiting area, they waited for his current meeting to be done with. It was only about 10 minutes before Inoichi exited the Hokage's office. Ah, Inoichi-sama, are you in a hurry to be anywhere else at the moment? Neko said as she stood up. No, I do not have anywhere to be for at least another hour or so. What did you need, Neko-san? Inoichi said as he stopped heading toward the exit. Well, we were here to give a report and I believe your expertise of the mind may prove to be invaluable, Neko said evenly. Well, I can certainly listen in and give you my opinions if Hokage-sama allows it, Inoichi said with a shrug. Thank you, Inoichi-sama, let's go ahead and begin then, Neko said as she knocked on the door to the Hokage's office. Enter, Hiruzen said through the door. Good morning, Hokage-sama. We are here to give our reports over our charges of last night, Neko said, bowing. Ah yes, but why have you brought Inoichi-sama with you? Hiruzen said skeptically. There may be some more mental issues than first thought. Inoichi-sama agreed to give his input on such problems. Neko said. Very well, proceed, Hiruzen said, putting down the papers he was going through. It took a while, but eventually the meeting was over. They discussed how malnourished Naruto was and that they had already taken care of it. Inoichi was needed for the odd behavior Naruto was displaying with near bipolar attitude. Inoichi agreed to take a deeper look at him when Jiraiya was able to confirm the seal's integrity. Other topics were what to do with him and Tenten. First thought were to have someone adopt him. Inoichi offered to take them both in, but the idea was shot down by Hiruzen. When Naruto was first born, it was decided that he could not be adopted into a clan. The main reasoning was that it would give a single clan too much power when he grew up. Another reason was they could not give the Uchiha a possible way to gain control of the fox. They were under enough suspicion at the time anyway. Also, if he were to be adopted, his own inheritance would be given over to whoever adopted him, and Hiruzen just flat didn't trust anyone enough with that. Inoichi understood, if it was a little hesitantly however. From what Neko and Itachi's reports hinted at, Hiruzen decided it would be very important to keep Tenten and Naruto in contact in some form. For the time being, that meant staying with Neko. The excuse that they would have to use was that the hospital was still going through investigation after Naruto's failed assassination. Everyone seemed to agree, and with that taken care of, everyone was dismissed until Jiraiya was to return in 2 days. Upon their return to Neko's apartment, they found themselves looking at a rather odd scene. In the back of the apartment building there was a small park. In said park, Naruto and Tenten were not playing on the swings or going down the slide. No, they were instead watching Inu show how to properly throw a kunai. Itachi understood that Naruto was going to become a ninja at some point, and by the time he was his age, he was already a shinobi. Training at this age was normal by his standards. Neko was a little more reserved. She had been trained at his age as well, but seeing him try to throw kunai made her a little nervous. Inu Taiko, what the hell are you doing? Neko asked sweetly. Well, little Naruto-kun and Tenten-chan saw the kunai on my leg and asked me about them. So I decided to throw a few. They thought it was really cool and wanted to learn how to do it, so dulled a few a little bit, and here we are, Inu said, rubbing the back of his head. Neko was about to argue when she saw Tenten grab a kunai and fling it straight into the tree she was aiming at. How long have you been at it, Inu Taiko? She asked a little less angrily. Well, I would guess I let them start throwing them about 20 minutes ago, Inu said, looking deep in thought. She managed to actually stick one into the tree after only 20 minutes. Add that to how bad Inu Taiko is at teaching, she might be a prodigy herself. Neko thought, completely missing Itachi walking past her to talk to Naruto. "How is your training going, Naruto-kun?" Itachi asked as straightforwardly as he could. "Well, I suck at throwing them." "Why would you throw a knife anyway?" Naruto said, mostly to himself however. Itachi thought on it for a second. It was rather difficult for him to talk to such a young child that wasn't from a shinobi family. At least a living one. Well, if you practice enough, you wouldn't have a chance to get caught if you beat your enemy from a distance. Itachi said, the simplest thing he could think of. "Well, I saw a ninja shoot a huge fireball before. Why not use those instead?" Naruto asked innocently enough. Sadly, in this day and age that seems to be everyone's thought process. Itachi said, with a slight downcast expression. No one would ever notice however because he didn't really change all that much. "Let's say you can make 10 fireballs before you become tired." Itachi started. "Now you can carry, say, 100 kunai. If you shoot one fireball, then everyone is going to know where you are at and chase you. Now if you hit them with a kunai, they wouldn't see or hear you and you would be able to stay hidden. Everyone seems to think that the flashier the technique, the better it is. I feel that is completely the wrong approach. I get it. So instead of just looking cool, being sneaky would be better." Naruto said with a bit of a grin. He may not have realized it just yet, but that was some of the best advice he would be getting in his career. Exactly, there is always a way to win a fight before it starts. By avoiding large-scale battle, many lives are saved. Itachi said, with Naruto eating every word of it up. Naruto went off on his own little world, dreaming of being a super awesome ninja. Taking down hundreds of people at once, sneaking around with them never seeing him. He was broken out of his dream world when he heard Tenten shout out in joy. He snapped his head around to look at her and she was yelling, "I did it!" pointing at the tree she was throwing kunai at. Naruto glanced at the tree to see 3 kunai sticking out of it. Naruto was happy for her but annoyed that he couldn't do it yet. Itachi didn't really have any thoughts about it. Neko was impressed with the girl's quick learning of how to throw kunai. Inu just smiled. He was such a good teacher after all. "Very well done Tenten-san," Inu said. "Maybe I should give you a real target." Inu walked over to the tree she had been throwing at, pulled her 3 kunai out, and took a few steps back. Flashing through a few seals he made a small earth wall. Pulling out a sheet of paper, he pinned it to the wall and started walking back to Tenten. "There we go. That should make for a nice level 2 in kunai training," Inu said, giving himself a mental pat on the back. He should offer to train more people. Tenten narrowed her gaze at her new target and tossed her 3 kunai at it. The first hit the wall a little to the right. The second bounced off the paper. The third was just a little low. Inu was again impressed. He thought it would take her a few more hours to get her grouping that close to the target. When she came back to where she was throwing her kunai from, she asked Inu. "Inu-san, if this is level 2, what is level 3? Inu stroked his chin. He was kind of kidding about the level 2 thing but figured he should go along. Level 3 would be doubling the distance of the throw, Inu said with confidence. "What about level 4 then?" Naruto chimed in. "Smaller target further away," Inu said, simply running out of ideas. "Well then what is the hardest level?" Naruto said, thinking he could do all of these easy enough. "I can answer that." Itachi spoke up as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small copper coin with a small square hole in the center. "Think ancient Chinese currency. I'll put a description of the currency in this FIC at end of chapter." He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, revealing his Sharingan. Naruto and Tenten quirked their heads a bit at this but didn't say anything. Itachi then tossed the coin at the wall in front of them and tossed 2 kunai in that direction. He ricocheted the second kunai off the first and pinned the coin to the wall. Naruto and Tenten were standing there with their jaws dragging on the floor. Neko sighed. Inu was shaking his head. "Did you really need to use your Sharingan for that?" Itachi just nodded. "Well, I wanted it to look easier than it is, so yes." Tenten and Naruto didn't get what they were talking about, so they asked what the Sharingan was. "It is my dujutsu," Itachi said as he activated his Sharingan. "With these eyes I can see chakra, copy jutsu and predict enemy movements to an extent. They are sent down the Uchiha bloodline, so only my family has them." Inu chuckled at the dry explanation and thought of showing the kids his Sharingan eye to mess with them. He decided against it for now. He was still in Anbu at the moment. "That's so cool," Naruto said, still amazed. He was a little jealous if he had to admit it. They looked so cool after all and sounded strong. Tenten would agree they looked cool, but she knew that it wasn't the eyes that made someone strong. With enough practice, you could do it as well. Just make sure if you want to become shinobi you take your training seriously. It would not be wise to take your future for granted when your training is the only thing between life and death. Itachi said grimly. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and Tenten just nodded. Well then I had better get started now. Naruto said as he turned back toward the tree he was tossing kunai at. Well then, I think that's a fair idea. You're still under observation so don't strain yourself too much. I'll be back in a bit. Neko said, as she left into the town. A day and a half passes rather quickly. Inu came by every morning and supervised Naruto and Tenten's kunai training. Naruto finally managed to get more of them to stick to the tree than bounced off. Tenten had managed to hit the smaller target more times than not. Inu was pleased with their progress. Day 3 and they were both showing a growing interest in being shinobi. They both were also showing devotion to training, something he saw a decline in the last few years. He devoted everything he had of his childhood to training and had a lot to show for it. But there were so many fresh genin that just did not seem to have that drive to advance quickly. If they both continued to take this as seriously as they are now, they could both hit Chunin at an early age. Inu thought with a smile in his eye. He had started them on their path and hoped he would be there to advance them further in it as well. Neko was pleased that in a few months, both Naruto and Tenten would be capable of protecting themselves from the stupidity of the civilian populace. Itachi has managed to get a bit closer to Naruto and Tenten as well. They both saw him as nice enough, if not a little odd overall. However, today wasn't to be as simple as the last two. Today Jiraiya was returning to the village to take a look at Naruto's seal. Neko knew that they were going to be talking about sensitive subjects so she let Inu lead Naruto to the meeting. She had zero knowledge in Fuinjutsu and while Inu only had a little, it was better he go overall. In the meantime, she decided to take Tenten on a shopping trip. They picked up some groceries and decided to pick Tenten up a new change of clothes. In the Hokage's office, Naruto had just been introduced to Jiraiya. They talked for a few minutes before getting down to business. Okay Naruto, as you know I am known as the greatest Fuinjutsu master of the village. The reason Sensei asked me to talk to you is that a few days ago you were attacked and managed to save yourself with an unknown power, correct? Jiraiya asked sternly. Naruto started to sweat a little but nodded nonetheless. Jiraiya continued. Well, I honestly don't know how to sugarcoat this so I'm just going to say it. The power that saved you was the power of the nine-tailed fox that has been sealed inside you since you were born. Seeing Naruto start to shake, he decided to just hurry up and skip the history lesson. When the fourth Hokage defeated the fox, he could not kill his till he sealed it. The strongest seal he knew had to be placed on a human. If that human was not exceptionally young, it would have most likely killed whoever it was placed on. With that in mind, you were the only child born that day and it was sealed in you. Jiraiya said, softening his voice a bit. It was a lie but it was close enough to the truth that it got the point across. So I am the nine-tailed fox? Naruto said, looking completely broken at this point. No, Jiraiya said bluntly. Jiraiya pulled out a small scroll and unrolled it onto the floor. He pointed to the center of it. This is a sealing scroll. It is quite similar to the seal you have, although quite a bit weaker. Jiraiya explained as he pumped some chakra into it. As he pumped chakra into it, two small orange books appeared in the middle of the scroll. While the scroll represents you, these books represents the fox. Do you understand? Jiraiya asked. Naruto just looked at him a little confused and still a little depressed. Jiraiya sighed and resealed the books before throwing the scroll at Naruto. Hey, why did you throw the scroll at me? Naruto asked, rubbing his throbbing head. What are you talking about? I threw some books at you. Jiraiya said, feigning ignorance. This isn't a bunch of books. Naruto said, waving the scroll around for added effect. Well then, do you get it now? Just because there are a bunch of books inside the scroll, doesn't mean that the scroll is a bunch of books. It is still a scroll. Jiraiya explained. Naruto thought about it for a moment before nodding. Taking the scroll back from Naruto and tossing it to the Hokage, Jiraiya continued. This brings me to the second reason I am here. All the old goats in the council seem to think the seal holding the fox is breaking. The fourth was a Fuinjutsu Grandmaster if one has ever been seen in the village. I know it is fine, but they told me to come look at it anyway. Jiraiya had Naruto pull off his shirt and ran 2 fingers glowing with chakra across his stomach. Both he and Hiruzen cringed slightly at how scrawny he looked. Naruto watched with interest while he worked. He saw the seal show up on his stomach as Jiraiya inspected. After checking it over and taking a few notes, Jiraiya walked over to the couch and took a seat as he started reading through his notes and comparing them to some information he had with him. After a few moments, Jiraiya stood up and walked back to Hiruzen's desk. He stood behind it and laid out his notes before him. From what I can tell, Minato preformed the Shiki Fujin to pull the soul of the fox and place it in Naruto. Afterwards, he placed a Hake no Fuin Shiki over it to completely seal the fox's chakra. The way he built it, though, suggests he wants Naruto to slowly become adapted to the chakra over time. Jiraiya said. What do you mean, Jiraiya-kun? Hiruzen asked. He knew both seals, he was not so familiar with the Hake no Fuin Shiki however. Well, it looks like he has the seal set to slowly leak the fox's chakra into Naruto's chakra network. I mean very slowly. When he died, he sent a scrolled toad to me with some sort of key formula in it. When I received it, I didn't understand what it was. How it was built, however, appears to coincide with this second seal and should allow me to tighten or loosen the flow of the fox's chakra at will. Jiraiya explained, thinking about it more and more. How much chakra is currently being leaked right now, Jiraiya-kun? Hiruzen asked with a bit of worry to his tone. From what I can feel from the seal, it would be enough to activate a small storage scroll maybe once a day. There is absolutely nothing to worry about there. From my best guess, it will strengthen his coils just a bit with use. Jiraiya said with a bit of a smile. This kid has it made. His coils are going to be made of steel by the time he hits Jonin. If I can manage to regulate how much of the demon's chakra is pulled through the seal as he grows, he may just become immune to it after a few years. Jiraiya thought. Well then, how about Naruto-kun's mental well-being? Can the fox influence his mind? Hiruzen asked. Not at all. The seal completely locked the fox's soul deep in Naruto's subconscious. Any form of control should be completely impossible for it. Jiraiya stated flatly. But I heard it yell at me before. Naruto said quietly. Jiraiya stroked his chin thoughtfully. Has he talked to you since then? Jiraiya asked Naruto. Naruto shook his head in the negative. Well then, I would wager it was with the fox's chakra more freely flowing through you. You were able to hear it from deep in your mind. I do not believe, however, that has actually directly contacted you. Jiraiya said as he took a few notes. Do you think that it would be safe for Inoichi to check inside his mind? Hiruzen asked. His mood was slowly improving and was hoping that this would be everything cleared for today. If you're talking about the Yamanaka clan head, then I would say it would be safe. I wouldn't recommend anyone else to try it though. I would also like to observe the seal while he does. Jiraiya said before taking a seat once again. Of course. I was actually planning on that. He should be waiting outside actually. I will call him in. Hiruzen said as he stood up and walked out the door for a moment. Returning with Inoichi a few seconds later, he returned to his seat. Hello again, Naruto-san. How have you been doing? Inoichi asked, trying to make a little small talk before he dove into his mind. I have been fine, Inoichi-sama, thank you for asking. Naruto said with a small bow. Jiraiya quirked his eyebrow and looked to Hiruzen. Hiruzen just shook his head slightly. Jiraiya understood it as a, I'll tell you about it later, kind of motion. Well, Naruto-san, Hokage-sama asked me here to give you a full checkup inside your mind. My clan specializes in the workings of the mind and hopefully can ensure that you are fine after what happened. Inoichi said with a slightly down look on his face. I think I understand what you mean. You think the fox is controlling me. What do you need me to do? Naruto said with a rather dull look on his face. Inoichi snapped his head toward the Hokage. Why the hell did he tell Naruto about the fox? Inoichi asked himself. No matter, should make it a lot easier to do this anyways. All I need you to do is relax and close your eyes. Inoichi said as calmly as he could. He didn't want his voice to sound as angry as he was at the moment. Naruto nodded and closed his eyes. As Inoichi rested his hands on the sides of Naruto's head and began his jutsu, Jiraiya proceeded to place a hand on his seal. Inside of the mindscape, Inoichi was at a loss for words. Most people's mindscapes were just made of hallways of pure white. If the person led a less than honorable life, the hallways were more of a gray color. All usually had a series of doorways, some being open, some closed and a few locked. Open doors were usually the thoughts that were constantly on a person's mind. Closed doors were usually memories of the past. Sometimes these were memories that people had forgotten about naturally. Locked doors, however, these were usually intentionally forgotten. Many had been repressed or just bad memories in context. Usually there were only a few locked doors unless the person was an abuse victim or were just not good people. The color of the walls usually made it easy to determine what it was at first glance. Naruto's mindscape, however, was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was many long hallways of many locked doors. Where Inoichi started in was a bright white hallways with only a few open doors. Beyond that, the doors started to close abruptly and the walls had gotten darker. There were a few spots going down that were bright with only 2 doors under the light, then it got dark again. Unlike most mindscapes, this one went to black. Most of the time you could see a long ways down. Naruto's, however, turned to complete black. It looked like a hallway with many broken lights. The occasional speck of light all that told him there was more than the first few rooms. Remembering he had a job to do, he poked his head in the first bright open door he saw. He saw a memory of Naruto and Tenten playing alone in the orphanage. He looked into the next few rooms and saw they all had Tenten involved. He decided that it was a recurring theme, so moved on to the first closed door he saw. The walls outside the door were a little darker than the previous rooms. He slowly opened the door to see Naruto crying in an alleyway. He could hear yelling like an angry mob. Inoichi instantly understood the implications. He could not believe that something like this would have never been brought up in a council meeting, however. Disgusted by what he had seen, he decided to try another room. Another closed door just across for the one he had just exited. This was another painful room to look into. It was simply Naruto laying in the hospital. His first hope was hoping for the best. Perhaps it was an accident. I don't understand how it is still alive. Of course the demon wouldn't die from poison. Why don't we just unplug him? The Hokage himself brought the demon in. He knows who is on call. None of us would make it out alive. Naruto was shaking from hearing these voices outside his room. Inoichi was about to leave now and destroy the hospital himself. He knew, however, this was only the first few rooms that were still only gray outside of them. As he poked his head down further down the hallway, there were still so many horrible rooms. Everything from villagers tripping him as he walked down the road, kids throwing rocks at him, parents praising their kids for throwing rocks at him, the kids from the orphanage stealing his food, the glares and whispers everywhere he went. When he finally made it down to the darkest part of his mindscape, he could hear a voice. It was nothing but a whisper, but it felt like it was right on top of him. He couldn't help but imagine that it had to be the Kyuubi. He could feel himself being pulled further and further down the hallway, past many black doors with several locks. Part of him knew the fox was doing it, but another part of him trusted Jiraiya to disrupt his concentration if the fox was influencing Naruto. He soon found himself seeing a small orange glow at the end of the hallway, as if there was a fire. He kept approaching, feeling the slight weight pressed upon him get worse. He trusted Jiraiya inexplicitly, so he pressed on. Upon reaching the room at the end of the hallway, he could see that it was an open room. Inoichi knew this was important but didn't say anything just yet. "So, you actually entered this room. You are quite a strong-willed human, Inoichi," the Kyuubi said in a very bored and tired tone. "I thank you for the compliment, Kyuubi-san," Inoichi said with a deep bow. He knew this was a horrible idea, talking so casually with the nine-tailed fox. But he needed to try and understand the Kyuubi if he were to help Naruto. Kyuubi-san is it? It seems the Yamanaka family has really fallen in these last years. They were far more refined in the past, maybe less courageous, but still more refined. The Kyuubi spoke in a cold tone. "My apologies. Do you have a name you wish for me to call you by?" Inoichi said, sweating a bit more now. If he pissed the Kyuubi off, he very well may get crushed being this close to its cage. The Kyuubi quirked its head a bit. "You are not worthy of knowing my name. Lord Kyuubi would suffice. I would, however, caution you of thinking of me as it. I may have been born without a gender, however I identify as a male. Make sure not to forget it." "My apologies again, Lord Kyuubi," Inoichi said again. He was getting even more nervous now. He was sure he had never called the Kyuubi an it. Somehow he had known he had though it. Yes, your clan in particular are always surprised when you come across another who can read minds. Never ceases to amaze me when a clan with an ability sees someone else do the same thing. Such ignorance. However, these topics are growing tedious. What did you come here for, Yamanaka? The Kyuubi said in a rather annoyed tone. I was tasked with discovering if you were properly sealed within Naruto-kun. There have been many concerns about the stability of the seal and if. Inoichi said before he was cut off. Yes. You want to know if the big, bad, Kyuubi no Yoko is messing with poor little Naruto-kun's head. Do not try to waste my time, Yamanaka. What is it that you are really here for? Kyuubi said, his tone announcing he was approaching the end of his patience. I am here to find out if you hold the power to influence Naruto-kun. Inoichi said with as much confidence as he could. He was sure that the Kyuubi could not influence Naruto's mind. If he could, he never saw any evidence anywhere. He also wanted to know if the Kyuubi was wanting to harm Naruto. The Kyuubi just stared Inoichi down. Inoichi just flinched slightly. I also wanted to know if you were trying to intentionally harm Naruto or not. He said quietly. You humans are never able to just speak your minds. To give you my answer, no. If Naruto were to die, I would also be dead. For a while at least. The Kyuubi said. While I am stuck in here, Naruto is my jailer. He is a direct representation of myself. If he is weak, then I appear weak. If he is strong, then I appear strong. Why would I try to weaken him at all? The Kyuubi said, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. Inoichi was blown away. Everyone was concerned for the Kyuubi breaking out or trying to possess Naruto. The Kyuubi seemed far more intelligent than he was led to believe before he came to the mindscape. As for possessing Naruto, the Kyuubi said, as he knew what Inoichi was thinking about. If I were to possess him, what do you think the odds of him surviving afterwards? 0. Inoichi said, looking at the ground in front of him. Exactly. Now then, I grow tired of these ignorant conversations. Try telling the bumbling idiots you call leaders to read a book next time. I would recommend leaving this mindscape now before I forcefully eject you. The Kyuubi said, laying his head down on his front paws. Yes, thank you for your time, Lord Kyuubi. Inoichi said with a bow of his head before fading out of the mindscape. Stupid humans. The Kyuubi said once more before closing his eyes. Back inside the Hokage's office, Inoichi removed his hands from Naruto's head and stepped back to sit on the couch. After a moment the Hokage spoke. Is everything all right, Inoichi-sama? Hiruzen asked. Relatively speaking, yes, Hokage-sama. Inoichi said, his face a little pale. After another moment, Inoichi flashed through a few hand signals. Hiruzen understood. He was signaling something akin to an S-ranked secret. He would have to send Naruto home. Naruto, how are you feeling? Hiruzen asked. I'm okay. A little tired is all. Naruto said quietly. Well, I suppose you should get some rest then. Hiruzen said as he called for Inu to come back in. With Inu escorting Naruto back to Neko's home, they could begin the report. Okay, Inoichi, spill it. How much control does the Kyuubi have over Naruto? Hiruzen asked with authority in his voice. I honestly could not tell. It appears that he could control Naruto if he wanted to. However, no one appears to have realized that the Kyuubi was far more intelligent than anyone gave him credit for. Inoichi said. Elaborate. Hiruzen commanded. In the brief time I talked to the Kyuubi, he expressed that he had talked to another Yamanaka before. He appeared to be insulted when I called him Kyuubi-san. He was also able to read my mind. Inoichi said before Hiruzen stopped him for a moment. You're telling me that the Kyuubi was able to read your mind? Hiruzen asked, quite shocked himself. Yes. He was also seemed to be rather bored. I might be assuming too much, but he seems to hold no ill will towards Naruto. He sees him as a representation of himself. Since he is sealed within him, he sees no point in weakening him and thus making himself look weak. Inoichi stated simply. Jiraiya-kun, did you notice any fluctuations in the seal? Hiruzen asked. No, the seal seemed completely fine. There was the constant trickle that was always there. Nothing out of the ordinary. Jiraiya said, rather bored overall. He had trained the 4th Hokage in Fuinjutsu in the beginning and he was skilled enough to understand just how proficient he was at it. The Kyuubi also told me that if Naruto were to die, he would die as well. At least for a little while. Inoichi said. Well, with that the fox cannot escape the seal. Naruto would die far before he managed to escape. You asked for me to check the seal. With what Inoichi has said and what I know on the subject and plus how good a seal the fourth chose, I would say the seal is perfectly fine. There is absolutely nothing to be worried about. That is my answer, tell the council. I'll be at my apartment. Jiraiya said before leaping out the window. Not bothering to stop Jiraiya, Hiruzen just sighed and leaned back in his seat. I'll call a council meeting later tonight. Please just write everything you found out down. I'll read it before the meeting. Hiruzen said. One last thing, Hokage-sama. Naruto appears to have been subjected to several forms of harassment from the civilian populace. There was also several attempts made by hospital staff to kill him whenever he was admitted. Inoichi said before nearly falling over with how much killing intent the Hokage blasted out. Inoichi, send my apologies to your wife and daughter. You will be stuck with some overtime in the coming days. We have a hospital to clean up. Hiruzen nearly shouted. Inoichi simply nodded and stood to leave. I fear the villagers have done far more damage than the Kyuubi had ever done to him, Hokage-sama. I pray that Ibiki does not hate me for how much work we will no doubt send his way. He said as he walked toward the door, stopping before he opened it. I am unsure, but in a person's mind, when a door is open, it means that person wants it to be open. The door that led to the Kyuubi's cell was left open, Hokage-sama. I am unsure what it means, but I think Naruto may have more contact from what we want. Given the memories I saw were not the worst, I would not give it any more thought. He said before leaving the Hokage to his thoughts. Naruto woke up in an unfamiliar place. It was dark, it was cold, and he could only see a small orange light in the distance. Realizing he had nothing else he could see to do, he walked toward the orange light. There was a very strange feeling in his stomach. He couldn't figure out what it was. All he knew was that it was getting worse the closer he got to the orange light. Before he knew it, he was lightly sweating and feeling more and more nervous. He kept pressing on despite all of this. When he finally got to where the orange light was coming from, he realized it was an open door. He slowly poked his head in the door. What he saw was a large, open room with the walls covered in pipes, the floor covered in just a few inches of water, and a huge, silver gate. He didn't notice any of this at first glance, however. The only thing he noticed was the colossal, orange, fox with 9 tails sweeping lazily around behind him. Naruto knew he should be very afraid of what he was looking at. However, all he felt was a strange calm sweep over him. The foxy was staring at cracked open one of his eyes and looked at the boy in front of him. What are you doing here, boy? I had thought you were finished with this place since it has been so long. The Kyuubi spoke evenly. I have never been here before. Kyuubi dono. Naruto said, the calm being ripped out of his head, putting him in a slight panic before bowing deeply. He was terrified at hearing the fox's voice and was scared he might be offended at anything he did. Relax, boy, if I could eat you and not be killing myself I would. Since that is not the case, sit and relax for a while. It has been a while and apparently I have to fill you in on some things. The Kyuubi said with a wave of its paw. Naruto knew he should sit down immediately, or he might anger the fox somehow. He spun around a few times looking for a chair. He couldn't see a chair and wondered where he was supposed to sit. He turned around one last time and right in front of him was a chair. How did I not see the chair? It was right there. Naruto thought before taking a seat. The Kyuubi, however, raised an eyebrow. So the kid can actually manipulate his mindscape at this age. His thoughts lead me to think he isn't aware of it himself. Maybe a test. Boy, do you know where you are right now? For that matter, do you know how you made that chair just now? The Kyuubi asked with some curiosity in its voice. No, I don't know where I am, Kyuubi dono, or how I made the chair. I assumed you did that for me. Naruto said. He was starting to actually understand that the Kyuubi did not bring him here to kill him. Wherever here was, we are inside your mind, boy. This is everything that your mind stands for. You were looking for a chair so desperately that one appeared. Why don't you try and get rid of the water in here the same way? The Kyuubi recommended. Naruto nodded and tried to think of how he made the chair. He had just thought about a chair being in the room. He tried thinking of a dry floor instead. After a few moments, the water started to disappear. Naruto opened his eyes when he felt his feet start to dry. He grinned ear to ear and felt proud of his accomplishment. The Kyuubi just smirked at him. Well done, boy. It seems your mind is not as feeble as it appeared. The Kyuubi said with a chuckle. Naruto was in shock. Did the Kyuubi no Yoko just compliment him? Yes, your mind is not as feeble as it appears. However, it is still feeble. Since you apparently do not remember me at all, it leads me to believe you have managed to lock up much of your mind much better than I thought possible. The Kyuubi said as if it was nothing. Excuse me, Kyuubi Dono, what do you mean that I locked up my mind? Naruto asked, fear slowly settling down. You have been here several times before. How you managed to forget is beyond. I was probably asleep when you did it. When I awoke, I saw your mind was much different than before and much of your mind was locked off. The Kyuubi said before pausing for a moment. If you do not remember any of it at all, that makes me think that someone tampered with your memories. It was either that Yamanaka that was here a few hours ago, or he is incompetent and did not notice it at all. The Kyuubi said, sounding slightly bored. I don't understand at all. Naruto said. This was way over what someone that was almost 6 years old should know. It would take days for me to just tell you everything you missed of the last year or so. I am not about to waste that much time. Just go open one of the doors outside of here. You should be able to open them easy enough. Come back whenever you remember everything. At least you understand the basics of respect. The Kyuubi said before closing his eyes again. Naruto frowned slightly. How did he forget anything? He didn't remember forgetting anything. He got up and walked outside the Kyuubi's room. He saw several closed doors in the darkness. He decided to just go inside and figure out what was in them. When his hand wrapped around the door handle, however, he was instantly shocked and thrown into the wall across the hallway. When he hit, everything went black for a moment. I guess someone had fail-safes in place so he couldn't regain his memories. Not my problem, however. Should be fun if he ever gets them back again. Being locked up without anyone to talk to, it all got boring after so long. The Kyuubi thought before closing his eyes again. When he came back around, he realized he wasn't in his mind anymore. He was back in Neko's guest room. He went to get up before he remembered that Neko told him to wait for her to tell him he could get up. Then he remembered he wasn't hurt, so he should be fine to get up. He headed out toward the living room. When he got there, he heard Neko call out from the kitchen. Well, good morning, sleepyhead. Did you get enough rest? Neko asked. Yes, thank you again for letting me sleep here, Oni-chan. Naruto said. Where are the others? Everyone is still out at the park. I was just about to bring them out a few sandwiches. Would you like one? Neko asked. Sure, you make the best sandwiches after all. Naruto said with a grin. Neko just chuckled quietly and made an extra. Here, go ahead and take these out to everyone. I'll be down soon. Naruto nodded, took the plate from her and headed out back to the park. What he saw was Tenten still throwing kunai at the target. Itachi coaching her a little. Inu reading a little orange book. He smiled at everyone when they saw him approaching. Lunch is here, he said, setting the plate down on a nearby picnic table. Tenten gathered up the kunai around the target and handed them to Inu. Inu just placed them in his holster and sat down at the table. So Naruto-kun, how are you feeling? Tenten asked first. I feel okay, still tired honestly. Naruto said before taking a bite of the sandwich he grabbed. They chatted idly for a while before Naruto and Tenten got up to go practice someone. Inu spoke up. Are you two determined to become shinobi? Of course, Naruto said without hesitating. Yes, Tenten said just after. That's good. It is always nice to work with shinobi with such strong conviction. Inu said with an eye smile. I am going to go see what is taking Neko so long. She said she was going to come down here soon. Inu said before heading upstairs. Naruto and Tenten just shrugged and continued practicing. Inside the apartment, Inu was talking to Neko. Well, they are certainly convicted to becoming shinobi. I have no doubt they will both go far in their careers. Inu said, well, that much was a given. I doubt you would have came up here to talk to me privately if that is all there is. What else are you thinking? Neko said. Well, we are still trying to figure out where they should live, correct? Inu asked. Neko just nodded before Inu continued. Well, this apartment is owned by the Hokage for use by shinobi exclusively, right? Again Neko just nodded, still not quite getting where he was going. Well, there is an empty apartment just above you, right? If we have them swear into the program, they could be given the apartments in the same building as you. They get to live normally and you are next door. There is also nowhere safer than this particular shinobi apartment block, is there? Inu asked almost sarcastically. Neko thought about it. Well, this is a quadplex. My neighbor is a chunin that is on extended medical leave. There, the other apartment above me is used by an anbu that is usually on long-term missions. There is definitely a spot open. That is only in this building, however. I believe several T and I shinobi took up a building for themselves a few buildings over. I doubt any civilians would come out here to harass Naruto if he was here. She thought. I will talk to the Hokage about it. I can't think of any major flaws with it. I think he would agree. I will go ask him now honestly. I don't think we should keep them both here for much longer. Neko said before grabbing the door handle and heading toward the tower. Come in, Hiruzen said, sounding quite tired at this point. Hokage-sama, I am here to report on Naruto Uzumaki. Neko said with a bow. Of course you are, Hiruzen said, sound rather annoyed. While trying to come up with a place to stay for Naruto Uzumaki and Tenten, Inu and myself agreed that he could live in the apartment above myself. Currently it is unoccupied, and should they both swear into the shinobi for a future time, I believe they could be allowed to stay there. Neko said evenly. Hiruzen leaned back and took out his pipe. He stared at it for a moment before looking back to Neko. While I personally believe that swearing loyalty early could cause for problems in the future, it is a sound idea. I will push it forward through the council meeting tonight and see to it. The Hokage said as he lighted his pipe. There will be no going back from this. Should they sign, they will be forced into the academy when they come of age. Take the time tonight to sit them both down and talk this out. I will call for you tomorrow afternoon. If they are ready, they will sign. Is that acceptable? He asked. Yes, Hokage-sama, Neko said, bowing again. Dismissed. Hiruzen said with a wave of his hand. Elections for a new civilian council member will not be held for another week. I should see what else I can milk this for before the numbers become even again. He chuckled before resuming his paperwork. Neko was only gone for around 20 minutes. In those 20 minutes, Inu was giving the kids a bit of a history lesson. He was explaining what the will of fire was and how the village remained strong through everything because of it. He had tried to keep a constant gauge on how enthusiastic they were about protecting the village. Naruto, of course, was stoked to be a part of it. Tenten was still excited, just wasn't practically jumping around. When Neko arrived to see Naruto exclaiming that he was going to be a ninja too, she realized that she had nothing to worry about. She briefly explained to Naruto and Tenten that they were going to have to find a place to stay soon. She told them of the shinobi lodgings reserved for leaf shinobi. They both understood how important it was for them to swear their loyalty to the village if they wanted the apartment. Naruto was headlong into the idea. Tenten, however, had one question. You said apartment. Are we going to be sharing an apartment? She asked. Neko wanted to slap herself in the face. She did not once consider getting them two separate apartments. She only asked for one. Tenten-chan, does it matter? Naruto asked innocently. Well, no, I guess it's just. Tenten actually couldn't finish. She realized that if they were in the same apartment it might be a little weird at first. However, she would be completely alone if she had an apartment to herself. She did not want that at all. No, I guess it doesn't, Tenten said with a smile. Inu was glad that didn't blow up in Neko's face. Itachi was indifferent again. Neko was a little skeptical but had to remind herself they were only 5 and 6 years old. There shouldn't be a problem. Neko spoke up after they had settled down. So you both will swear your loyalty to the village then, right? They both nodded quickly. Then Inu, could I get you to send a scroll to the Hokage? We might as well get the key to the apartment and get it cleaned out now. Neko said. Inu nodded and just bit his finger and went through a few hand signs before slamming his hand on the ground. In a puff of smoke, a small pug appeared with a Konoha forehead protector and a vest with a Hino Moheji seal on the back. Scarecrow, i.e. Kakashi. Pakun, can you run a scroll to the Hokage and retrieve a key from him? Inu asked. I guess. Where is it? Pakun asked lazily. Right here, Pakun-san, Neko said as she leaned down to hand him the scroll she had just finished. Pakun growled at her and snapped the scroll out of her hands, making her flinch. Haha, classic. I'll be back, Pakun said, laughing as he headed toward the Hokage office. What the hell was that, Inu? Neko said in a threatening tone. Pakun likes to mess with cats from time to time, Sorry about that, Neko. Inu said, just slightly sarcastically. Getting her anger under control, Neko just sighed. She muttered something about stupid mutts before heading back toward her house. Well kids, with that, you will officially be on the path of becoming shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. You will begin your official training in the academy after your 8th birthday. There is a full year between the start of new school years, so you will both be enrolling in the same time. Any questions? Inu asked. How did you summon a dog? Naruto asked, having completely missed everything Inu had just said. Pakun is not just a dog. He is a ninkin, one of the ninja hounds I summon. Inu said lazily. That's so cool. Itachi-san, can you summon ninkin too? Naruto asked. He still doesn't know how summoning works after all. My clan, the Uchiha, have a contract with the crows. It is usually handed down to members of the clan head's direct family. The clan head is my father, so I also am held as a summoner. Itachi said. That's so cool. Naruto said, getting excited again. It is cool, however, not many get the privilege to sign a contract. Most are held within specific clans after all. Inu said. Naruto started to look a bit downcast before realizing he wouldn't need a summon contract to be a strong ninja. Many became strong without ever having a contract after all. Then I will just have to train harder myself. Naruto said with a big grin on his face. That's the spirit, Naruto-kun. Inu said with an eye smile. With that, Naruto went back to the target range they had set up. Once more, with vigor, he got to training. A worn-out Naruto stumbled his way back into Neko's apartment. They had spent a few hours training until they decided to go ahead and clean out the apartment. Pakun had returned with the key and a mission scroll. It was a D rank for Itachi to clean the apartment. They knew it was just an excuse to keep Itachi around for a few hours but didn't say anything. It was just a simple one-bedroom apartment. It had a small bath, shower, simple kitchen, and a living room with a recliner and a 3-seat sofa with a table along with a small office. It was perfect for a single ninja. For two, however, it was rather small. It seemed the only thing that the apartment was without was a second bed. They decided to go and pick up an extra futon on the way back from swearing in tomorrow afternoon. After everything was cleaned, it was a nice apartment. It was built for shinobi, so it was not large by any stretch of the imagination. It was not meant for long-term living. It was for a shinobi that was always on the move. Naruto and Tenten could not be happier though. Naruto was happy to finally be out of the orphanage and have somewhere to call home. Tenten was just happy to not be separated from Naruto. They had both accepted that they were now forced to become shinobi for their village. Naruto was more than happy to do so. He would use his training to protect everyone that was precious to him. Admittedly, that list was rather short for now, but he would make friends someday. Tenten just remembered Naruto being attacked and being powerless to help him. She would get strong to not get left behind. Inu, Neko and Itachi were all pleased with their reasons to become shinobi. It was a rather odd sentiment to have for Itachi, being completely against what most other Uchiha believed in. Everyone went their separate ways for the evening. Tomorrow was the day they would swear to follow the program. Everyone needed their rest. It was time for the council meeting the Hokage was dreading. He would have to convince the council to allow Naruto to be accepted into the program and swear in early. It wasn't exactly unheard of, however, rarely used. They would accuse him of favoritism. They would question his leadership abilities. They would question if he was going to do the same for every orphan with a sob story. He could not tell him of his father. He would no doubt have to remind them of his status as Uzumaki heir. He was also stressed of having to deal with his inheritance. He was legally in charge of his entire estate. They would have to keep a firm grip of the estate entrusted to him. They would ask why he didn't have possession of his inheritance now. He had held on to it until he was a shinobi as per Kushina's will. If they asked him where the will was, he would have to dodge the question. There are mentions of Minato's assets as well. Civilians were never fun to deal with. Hokage-sama, everyone has gathered and are awaiting you in the council room. A bear-masked Anbu said, kneeling in front of Hiruzen. Yes, I will be there. Hiruzen said with a wave of his hand. The Anbu disappeared as Hiruzen headed toward the council chamber. As soon as he opened the door, he was bombarded with questions as to why they were there. Hiruzen sighed inwardly. This meeting was going to be the death of him. Quiet down. The purpose of this meeting tonight is to share the results of Inoichi-sama's and Jiraiya-sama's investigation of Naruto Uzumaki's seal of the Kyuubi no Yoko. The civilian side of the council was immediately light up with calls for death to the demon. Hiruzen sighed before blasting them with killing intent. I will give this council one last warning. This is completely a shinobi matter. The entire reason you are here is to help ease the mind of the civilians of the village. Any civilian council member who refers to Naruto as anything other than Uzumaki-sama, as his heritage dictates, will be killed on the spot. Am I clear? Hiruzen shouted. Several violent nods of acceptance from the civilian side, showing just how scared they were of the kami of shinobi. All right then. Now, the reports from Inoichi-sama and Jiraiya-sama have led me to a conclusion. The Kyuubi no Yoko is completely contained inside of Naruto Uzumaki and has no way of escaping the seal. Hiruzen said calmly. I would like to take this time to ask everyone on the Shinobi Council if they find this news surprising at all. Hiruzen said in a rather bored tone. A unanimous nod of negative from the Shinobi side proved his point. Well, that about sums that up. Now then, Naruto will be given residence within Shinobi housing effective tomorrow. He will be swearing to join the Shinobi ranks when he comes of age and graduates the academy. Any objections? Hiruzen asked. A short woman from the Cloth Merchant Guild voiced her opinion. Why are you showing such blatant act of favoritism? There are many homeless orphans at this time. Will you be showing these kids the same thing? She asked. It is completely up to my discretion. Naruto is the sole heir to the Uzumaki clan. As such, he cannot be adopted into a shinobi clan, and I do not trust any of the civilian sector with his well-being. The Yamanaka, Nara and Akamichi clans have all voiced the will of several of their members to adopt. The rest of the orphans will be well taken care of. Hiruzen said smoothly. A rather large man representing the livestock portion of the market district stood up. Hokage-sama, how long is the seal expected to last? What if the boy were to die young? He asked. Fuck these idiots, was the yell from the corner of the room. After yelling, Jiraiya dropped his stealth jutsu and marched over to offending councilman. Are you one of the greatest seal masters in the village? Jiraiya asked, shoving the man back into his chair. He could not speak, so he just shook his head. Do you have any fucking idea what would happen if some stupid fucking moron were to kill Naruto? Jiraiya continued to yell down at the councilman. He kept shaking his head, fearing for his life. To set the damn record straight. If Naruto dies, the Kyuubi dies. Jiraiya yelled. Then kill the demon. The councilman of the agriculture portion of the market yelled, interrupting Jiraiya and standing up. He did not get all of the way out of his chair before he found his head separated from his body. Anyone else about to disobey my orders? Hiruzen shouted, slamming the civilian council members with more killing intent. A few managed to shake their heads, most fainted or soiled their pants. Now then, if you idiots want to hear the rest of my explanation. If Naruto dies, the Kyuubi dies, temporarily. It would take a few years for the Kyuubi to resurface. No doubt pissed off that we tried to kill it. What do you think would happen to the village then? Jiraiya asked before walking toward the door. If left alone, the seal will keep the beast sealed until the end of Naruto's life. Afterwards, I would not want to be in the village when it comes back. Jiraiya finished before walking out the door. The council got ghostly quiet after he left. I trust everyone understands now. Hiruzen said calmly. A few nods were good enough for him. Now then, shall we get this over with and call a few votes? I will be increasing the punishment for attempted assault on Naruto Uzumaki from standard sentencing to torture and then death. Any objections? Hiruzen said evenly. A few civilians that were still awake were snapped out of their shock and threw their hands up. Hiruzen ignored them completely. The motion passes. He said, I will be hereby giving shinobi permission to apprehend any and all people that are whispering traitorous messages about Naruto Uzumaki. Depending on the offense, jail time or having their tongue cut out will be the punishment. Your thoughts, Fugaku? As head of the police force, this will be under your jurisdiction. Hiruzen asked. It will certainly give my men less of a headache with all of the fact-less complaints we receive about Naruto. I will accept the responsibility if it passes and vote for it myself. Fugaku said sternly. Very well, all against. Hiruzen said. Again the civilians were all opposed, but with a severe lack of awake numbers the vote was pointless. Motion carried. Let's see. We now need someone in charge of agriculture of the market. I would call for imports to be carried out by the Nara clan, local growing to be cared for by the Yamanaka clan, and local distribution to be handled by the Akamichi clan. Do you three accept these responsibilities? Hiruzen asked, looking toward the clan heads. Yes, Hokage-sama, they replied in unison. All opposed? Hiruzen asked, almost sarcastically. The civilians tried to fight it, but the shinobi accepted and there was nothing they could do. Final piece of business. I am hereby calling a vote to strip the civilian council the ability to vote at all during these meetings. Your constant ignorance and inability to listen to the shinobi side has led me to this decision. You may still propose new things for us to vote on, but we'll no longer have a vote. All against the motion, Hiruzen said calmly. The civilian side was in an uproar. There were screams of dictatorship, betrayal, and many curses at the Hokage. Yes, this is a dictatorship. I decided to form this council myself. I gave you all every chance to help lead this village and you spat in my face. Now then, all in favor? Hiruzen said, looking to the shinobi side. Every single shinobi in attendance raised their hand. Very well, the motion passes. The new schedule of meetings will be once a month instead of twice. If anyone has a reason to call a new meeting, see me in my office. With that, this meeting is over. Hiruzen said before standing up and walking toward the door, ignoring the raging civilians. Inoichi-sama, please walk with me. He said before walking out the door. What do you need, Hokage-sama? Inoichi asked when he caught up to Hiruzen. I was going to check up on how the hospital staff have been faring in T&I. I thought it best for you to come along. He said, of course, I am happy to say that it has been going quite well. We have made good progress working through the hospital as a whole. So far, only 4 have been deemed unfit to be retrained and are awaiting your sentencing. Inoichi said grimly. Very well, let's not keep Ibiki-san waiting. Hiruzen said. Of the 4 that were deemed unfit to be retrained, all were sentenced to death. They were completely lost to despair in regards to the Kyuubi and were deemed a hazard to village in its entirety. There were several more that were just acting on orders from the higher-ups to neglect treatment of Naruto. Those were given the fear of Kami to get them back in line. They had yet to solve the mystery of who this higher-up was that was convincing these nurses to harm Naruto. However, it was discovered that it was not just Naruto that was being neglected in the hospital. Several shinobi that officially died on the operating table died due to foul play. Several times where medical instruments were not cleaned properly and lead to life-threatening infections. Other times, blood got contaminated and inevitably killed whoever it was given to. They could tell someone was screwing with the hospital but had yet to track them down. Hiruzen pushed those thoughts aside for now. Inoichi, Ibiki and Anko were working around the clock to sort through the hospital. He, however, was giving Naruto and Tenten their new shinobi laws to follow. And do you swear to uphold the will of fire and all that it stands for with your life? He droned on. Yes, Hokage-sama, Naruto and Tenten replied. Will you also value the lives of your fellow shinobi as you would value your own lives? Hiruzen continued. Yes, Hokage-sama, they replied. Finally, will you accept the orders of your Hokage, your commanding officer or ranking shinobi in absence of the previous, without pause or question? Yes, Hokage-sama, then it is my privilege to accept you as future shinobi under my command. When you come of age, you will be sent to the academy. You will be trained to serve your village and fellow shinobi with everything you are made of. Hiruzen said. You are hereby given the property given only to those of the shinobi ranks. You will be viewed as future shinobi and not just as civilians. Therefore, shinobi law now applies to you. Hiruzen said before taking a moment to think. I will have Itachi Uchiha give you a rundown tomorrow morning on what that means. You will both receive a small allowance for food and other necessities until you graduate the academy. Aside from that, thank you for swearing into the program. I look forward to seeing you become full shinobi. Dismissed, Hiruzen said with a smile on his face. Both kids smiled and bowed before taking their leave. Inu and Neko were waiting for them outside the tower. So, is everything set then? Neko asked. Yes, we are swore in. Tenten said. Great, no sense waiting around. Let's go grab you an extra futon and run by Goodwill and see if we can get you a few changes of clothes. Inu said before he started to walk off. I'll go grab you guys something to fill your cabinets. Neko said. Thank you for the help, Neko-san. We will be sure to pay you back someday. Tenten said with a small bow. Don't mention it at all, Tenten. Just help me keep the garden while I am away on missions and we will call it even. The boys in the building have no idea how to care for a garden, I swear. She said, getting Tenten to laugh. They made their way to Goodwill while Neko shopped for some food. If Inu didn't think for one second that they still might refuse to help Naruto out, he wouldn't have come with them. The Goodwill was set up by the Hiruzen after the Kyuubi attack. Everything they managed to salvage from destroyed homes and what was donated from families that lost children and loved ones in the shinobi service donated what they could. This ranged anywhere from clothes to some ninja gear from time to time. This was mostly stored in the village armory unless it was in need of repairs. Anyone over the rank of genin was turned away as they should be able to afford their own gear. Most genin did not even come in because they had clans and families to support their early career. As they looked around, they only found clothes that were slightly better than rags. Tenten managed to find a small red, Chinese-styled dress that was her size along with a few extra t-shirts that were her size and a few pairs of black pants. Naruto found himself a pair of shinobi-style sandals that fit along with a few pairs of simple blue pants and a white shirt with an orange Uzumaki crest on the back. He did not know it was the Uzumaki crest, but he liked it. He also grabbed an extra plain black shirt as well. They made their way over to where there were some shinobi gear. They both found a few damaged kunai and shuriken. Inu imagined they were ones found in a deceased shinobi's home that they never got around to repairing. Naruto and Tenten found torn kunai holsters and asked Inu if they could be fixed. The leg straps on them were torn as if they were just torn off of an enemy shinobi. They were brown, so he guessed Iwa. Sure, I could teach you both how to sew. Try and find something made of a sturdy fabric to finish the straps on them. Inu said. They both nodded and got to hunting. They ended up with 3 sets of clothes each. A kunai holster each along with what appeared to be an old cloth satchel that was riddled with holes. They planned to use it to repair the kunai holsters. It brought new meaning to hand-me-down, but they were happy. They had a handful of kunai and shuriken for each of them. They brought all of their spoils to the front desk. The lady working at the front desk looked at the 2 kids before mumbling the prices on each of the sets of clothes. She totaled up 200 for all of Tenten's clothes and started to count off Naruto's clothes. The kids could not hear her, but Inu could perfectly clear. She was intentionally overpricing everything Naruto had brought up. Inu calmly walked up to the counter and picked up one of the damaged kunai before glaring holes through the lady working the desk. She quickly understood the threat and gave him the proper total. Inu paid the woman and left, but not before leaving a note for her. The note simply said, "The Hokage will hear of your mistreatment of Naruto." As they made their way back toward the apartment, Naruto spoke up. "I'm sorry you had to pay for us, Inu-san. Don't worry about it, Naruto-kun. The Hokage asked me to get you guys some clothes. I'm sure you will pay me back." Inu said with a wave of his hand. "I guess I will go thank Gigi tomorrow then." Naruto said, "Let's hurry and get you 2 settled in. I can teach you how to sew and repair kunai if we hurry." Inu said before walking a little faster. Honestly, he could tell Tenten was starting to notice the glares people were sending Naruto's way. He would prefer to not have that conversation. With luck, he could pawn it off on Neko. Until then, they would get the kids settled in and help them along with living on their own. With them owning an apartment in one of the safest places in the village, Inu and Neko could start taking more missions now. In a case where they were both needed, Itachi could now fill in. They would also start giving more training to the kids in the near future. You could never start training too early after all. "We're home," Naruto yelled as he entered the apartment for the first time as actual owners. "Naruto, don't forget this is an apartment, try not to yell so much." Inu reminded him before stepping in himself. "Ah, sorry Inu-san, I completely forgot. I got excited finally having a place that I can call home," Naruto said as he started to rub the back of his neck. "It is kind of surreal, isn't it, Naruto-kun?" Tenten said as he started to head toward the bedroom. "Yeah, it is rather hard to believe even though I am standing right here," Naruto said, looking around some more. "I am just glad we cleaned up a bit yesterday," Tenten said with a small laugh. "Me too," Naruto said. "Oh hey look, Neko already dropped off the futon," he said as he got into the bedroom with Tenten to drop off his clothes. "Yes, do you want to set them both out in this room or set one out in the living room?" Tenten asked quietly. "Well, we can just leave them both in here, right?" Naruto said before adding weakly. I am not sure if I would be able to sleep alone in a room after sharing a room with so many people in the orphanage. Me either, Tenten said before turning to the dresser. It only had 4 drawers and there was only a small closet as well. Naruto-kun, how should we divide everything? You can have the top 2 drawers and I will take the bottom and we can just split the closet. Does that work? Tenten asked. Sure, we can get another dresser too if you want. Naruto said quickly. No, it's fine, Tenten said before opening her drawer and putting her clothes in it. Naruto put his in a drawer when she was done and walked back out into the living room to see Inu sitting there with a cup in his hand. What are you drinking, Inu-san? I didn't know we had anything in the kitchen yet. Naruto said. I made a small pot of coffee. Neko got you guys some basic food and you had a few dishes in the cupboards. Inu said. We have dishes already? Naruto asked. Well yes, me and Neko cleaned them all while you were cleaning out the bathroom. Tenten said. Right, Naruto said sheepishly. The apartment had just about everything they needed so it shouldn't have surprised him. That's right, I had almost forgotten. I rounded up what stuff of yours that I could find in the orphanage. Inu said before he pulled out a small scroll. He unraveled it and applied chakra to the seal in the middle and a few things appeared. A pair of toothbrushes, an extra change of clothes for each of them, along with a few more simple things. Thank you, Inu-san, I honestly completely forgot about all of this. Tenten said. No problem, I should get to heading out however. Don't forget to train now. Also do try to be considerate of your neighbors, Naruto-kun. Inu said before closing the door behind himself. I'm not that loud, am I? Naruto asked with a defeated look on his face. Sometimes, Tenten replied with a shrug. Tenten decided to check through some of the food Neko got them. It was mostly simple things. There were some instant dinners along with bread, eggs, meat, rice, along with some veggies and a small fruit basket as well. I guess I am going to get stuck with cooking most of the time. Kami knows I cannot live off of ramen for the rest of my life after all. Tenten thought. A little while of checking out the house and Tenten got everything settled. She decided she should go get a book on how to cook. Hey Naruto-kun, do you want to go to the library with me? I need to try and find a cookbook. Tenten asked. I guess. Can we stop and thank Gigi for letting us live here, it's on the way after all. Naruto asked back. Tenten nodded and headed out the door. They walked down the main road and once again Tenten saw the glares the people were still putting at Naruto. She decided to talk about it later. As they entered the tower they checked in at the receptionist. She buzzed the Hokage and told him Naruto was here to see him again. She had him wait in the waiting room for him. They barely had a chance to sit down before the receptionist waved them to the office. Naruto-kun, it's good to see you as always. How do you like your apartment? Hiruzen asked. I love it, Gigi. I realized I never got a chance to thank you for helping us in that regard. Naruto said with a bow. Tenten following shortly behind. It was nothing, Naruto-kun. What about you, Tenten-chan, do you like the apartment? Hiruzen asked again. Yes, Hokage-sama, I am very grateful to you helping us get it. I look forward to joining the shinobi ranks and paying you back someday. Tenten said politely. That is very good to hear indeed. Hiruzen said with a smile. Well Gigi, we shouldn't take up too much of your time. I just really wanted to thank you since I didn't get the chance to this morning. Naruto said. Oh, okay. Well, have a nice day then, Naruto-kun, you as well, Tenten-chan. Hiruzen said. As they headed toward the door Naruto paused for a moment. Gigi, do you know where the library is? Tenten almost slapped her forehead, she didn't know either. Looking to get a bit of reading done, Naruto-kun? Hiruzen said with a chuckle. Actually, I was hoping to find a cookbook or two, Hokage-sama. Tenten said sheepishly. Well maybe I can set you up with an escort. Hiruzen said before turning to the small intercom in his desk. Has Shiho-chan left yet? Hiruzen said and after a brief pause he said. Great, I am sending Naruto and Tenten down, have her show them the way to the library for me. Well Shiho-chan can walk you guys over there. Don't keep her waiting too long however. I will talk to you later. Hiruzen said with a small wave. Hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, are you Shiho? Naruto asked a girl talking to the receptionist. Yes, are you the kids I was supposed to take to the library with me? Shiho asked shyly. Kids? You are barely older than us. Naruto said huffing. Still kids however. Come on, I gotta get back to the library. Shiho said, heading toward the door of the tower. It was a short trip, but they all got to talking. Shiho only 2 years older than both of them. Apparently on the first day of the academy they took an IQ test. Shiho scored exceptionally high and was offered an apprenticeship under Mitoku, the leader of the village's cryptanalysis team. She was new to the task, so she mostly just ran scrolls to the Hokage on occasion. She also spent a lot of her time in the library. Mitoku was also in charge of the library, so he started her apprenticeship there. Shiho was given the rank of genin upon being accepted by Mitoku. As no shinobi could officially apprentice a civilian, Tenten and Shiho became fast friends and even agreed to hang out in the library from time to time. When they finally arrived, they had to go their separate ways. Shiho had some documents to deliver to Mitoku and Tenten still had to find a cookbook. They grabbed a simple cookbook and headed home. Naruto plopped down on the couch and stretched out a bit. It felt pretty good getting that much of a walk done. We should do it more often, Naruto said. Sure, how about we go for another walk tomorrow morning? Tenten suggested. Sounds good to me, Naruto said with a smile. Tenten smiled too and decided she should try to make something for dinner. They mostly had rice and some veggies with a few spices. She decided to go all out on their first meal and thought she should invite Neiko over as well. Tenten had watched the cook at the orphanage before, so she had the general idea on how everything worked. After that it was just following directions. After she got most of it started, she softly yelled at Naruto. Naruto-kun, can you go down to Neiko-san's apartment and ask if she would like to have dinner with us? Sure, I'll be right back, Naruto replied, heading toward the door. Naruto came back a moment later with Neiko in tow. Smells really good. What are you cooking, Tenten-san? Neiko asked. Hayashi rice, Neiko-san. It looked really tasty in the cookbook and seemed simple. Tenten replied. Neiko nodded and agreed it smelled pretty tasty. She helped Naruto set the table so it would be ready with the food. Neiko also decided to show Naruto how to brew tea. It was a nice dinner. Neiko complimented Tenten on her cooking skills more than once. She was a bit more surprised that she was actually invited. Both Naruto and Tenten said it was a thank you for all the help they had given them in the last week. Tenten made way too much for just the three of them and ended up with quite a lot of leftovers for the next day. After they got everything cleaned up, they decided to get the bedroom sorted and get to bed early. Tenten woke up first and decided to take a shower before Naruto woke up. Tenten was deep in thought inside the shower before she heard the door open. She poked her head out of the curtain to see Naruto standing there frozen. Naruto-kun, Tenten said in a terrifyingly soft voice. Get out, she yelled at him. Naruto fell over backwards and ran right into the wall before scrambling into the other room. Tenten laughed at him and realized Naruto is a zombie in the mornings. This probably wouldn't be the only time this was going to happen. At least she was still behind the curtain this time. Naruto was seeing stars as he laid on the floor of the living room. He could kind of understand that Tenten was in the shower and he just walked in on her. The other part of him was wondering why his vision was kind of blurry. He didn't remember running into the wall after all. He felt rather stupid after a moment. He was used to boys having a different bathroom than the girls, so walking in on someone showering wasn't a big deal. Living with a girl was harder than he thought it was going to be. A few seconds later there was a knock on the door. Naruto got up to reveal Neiko staring at him. What happened, Naruto? What did I say about you guys yelling? Neiko said strictly. Ah, sorry Oni-chan. I kind of went into the bathroom while Tenten was still in the shower. Naruto said sheepishly. Of course that's what it was. Try not to do that again, Naruto-kun. Next time, knock first if the door is closed. Neiko said with a sigh. Yeah, okay, Naruto said, still out of it. Neiko nodded and walked back to her apartment. Naruto decided to get something simple to eat and just threw some bread in the toaster. He got his toast down before Tenten finally emerged from the shower. She glared at him before going to make herself some toast of her own. They didn't say anything, but Naruto knew she was still a little mad. He decided to just go take his shower and let her cool off. Naruto knew that it was his fault she was upset. He didn't exactly understand why it made her upset, but walking in on her in the shower is what did it. He was still only 5 years old and didn't understand the differences in anatomy in females yet. He got out and got dressed in his new clothes to try and break in his new sandals. They were shinobi sandals, just his size. They both left to walk around the village aimlessly. They didn't talk after Naruto tried to apologize. Naruto was getting nervous that he was going to lose his only friend after living together for one day. Naruto finally told Tenten that he didn't want to lose her as a friend over this. She quirked an eyebrow at that and laughed at him. She pushed him playfully and told him it wasn't that big of a deal. She explained that she was annoyed at him but was just trying to make sure he wouldn't do it again by ignoring him for a while. Naruto stuck his tongue out at her and ran ahead into the nearby park. As Naruto walked into the park, Tenten caught up to him and heard a woman dragging her child away from the park saying what she thought was, "I don't want you to play in the same park as that demon." She looked at Naruto and back at that woman only to see she wasn't there anymore. Tenten didn't think anything of her being gone but again wondered what she meant calling Naruto a demon. "Naruto-kun, why does everyone glare at you like they don't like you?" Tenten asked, concerned a bit when he started looking at the ground. She was worried that he looked this down, it had to be bad. "Naruto-kun, are you alright?" she asked, putting her hand on his shoulder. "I can't tell you, Tenten-chan. You will just hate me too," Naruto said sadly. "Do you secretly peek in the woman's side of the bathhouses?" Tenten asked while glaring at him. Somewhere in the elemental nations Jiraiya of the Sannin felt a dark omen. "What? No, why is that your first thought?" Naruto asked. "Then whatever it is, I won't hate you, Naruto-kun," Tenten said cheerfully. Naruto sighed in defeat. "Fine. When I was born the same day the Kyuubi attacked the village. The fourth Hokage couldn't kill it, so he had to seal it into something, or someone. I was born the same day, so it was deemed the safest person to seal it into." "What is the Kyuubi?" Tenten asked. "The Kyuubi is the nine-tailed fox that attacked the village 5 years ago. It was a giant fox made of chakra and it killed a lot of people and is now sealed inside of me. The villagers don't understand that I am not the Kyuubi but its jailer," Naruto said with a downcast expression. "So because it's sealed in you it's not able to do anything, right?" Tenten asked. "I guess so. That's pretty much what the Hokage told me," Naruto said. Tenten hugged Naruto and smiled at him. "There you go. Who cares what's sealed in you? You are still you and you are my friend." Naruto started crying into her shoulder. "I thought you wouldn't want to be my friend anymore. I was so scared," Naruto said between sobs. "It's okay, Naruto-kun. Something like this isn't enough to scare me off. You are stuck with me," Tenten said with a small laugh. "You have no idea how much that means to hear that, Tenten-chan," Naruto said, hugging her even tighter. In the shadows Itachi disappeared and headed toward the Hokage tower. "So, Naruto-kun has told Tenten he has the fox in him, correct?" Hiruzen asked. "Yes, she seems to still be friends with him regardless," Itachi said. "That is good. I'll have Neko tell her that it is a secret so it doesn't spread too far." "What of our new friend in T and I?" Hiruzen asked. She admitted to calling Naruto a demon and trying to get her child to safety. "Would you rather her be put to death or have her tongue removed?" Itachi said evenly. "Cut her tongue out. It will do no good for an example if she just falls out of the world." Hiruzen said. "It will be done," Itachi said before heading out of the office. This was one of the best days ever for Naruto. He managed to tell his best friend his darkest secret and she was still friends with him. After he finally managed to let go of Tenten, they decided to head back home and get in some target practice. They decided to put everything they had into it and kept at it until well after noon. After a few hours of practice they warmed up some lunch and went for another walk. This time for distance. They returned before the sunset and got more leftovers warming up. Neko came by and told Tenten that Naruto's secret was S-class secret and she could not tell anyone. She understood and there were no problems there. They went to bed each thinking different thoughts. Naruto thought about how close he and Tenten had to be for her not to be scared of the Kyuubi. Tenten thought that Naruto must have been quite stupid to think she would run away from him now. They would maintain a similar schedule for the next few months in preparation for the academy. It is finally here. Time for time skips to start happening. This first one is only 2 months but the story is going to pick up a bit here. Hooray! The last 2 months went by in a flash for Naruto and Tenten. Tenten got very good at throwing kunai and started learning how to throw shuriken. Naruto however was close behind but still learning with kunai. Itachi would stop by every now and again and teach them a new training exercise. First it was just to get them to do the basics. Push-ups, sit-ups, jogging instead of walking every morning, etc. The park where Naruto first told Tenten about the Kyuubi became their favorite spot to jog to. They would jog to there and walk back every morning and every afternoon. It was close to a mile away, so it made for good exercise. After the first month, Naruto's body filled back out and he no longer looked sickly. Much to Tenten's delight, Naruto had his 6th birthday without anything bad happening. He even got himself a few small gifts. Jiraiya had left him a green frog wallet. Inoichi got him a simple journal. Hiruzen gave him a small walking staff. Neiko had gotten him a small aloe vera plant and taught him how to take care of it. Secretly she knew he might need it someday if he ever burns himself training, but she didn't tell him that. Inu and Itachi were both away on missions, so they were unable to get him anything, he understood. The Ichiraku family even gave him a custom-ordered extra-large bowl with similar designs from the shop. They even brought it out filled with Naruto's favorite ramen. Once everyone had headed home, Tenten brought out her gift. It was a medium-sized fox doll that was a bright orange. She was worried he would hate it, so she didn't want to give it to him while there were guests around. He took one long look at it before throwing his arms around her. "Thank you, Tenten-chan, I love it," Naruto said as he fought back the tears that were threatening his eyes. She returned the hug and replied, "I'm glad you like it, Naruto-kun." Naruto stayed like that for a few moments before finally letting go. "Thanks again, Tenten-chan. It means so much. I am always worried that people are going to hate me because of the fox. You're the only person our age that knows and accepts me because of it," Naruto said. "It's all right, Naruto-kun. I told you before that I'm not going to leave you behind over something like that," Tenten said kindly. "You made this the best birthday ever," Naruto said quietly. "You're welcome, Naruto-kun," Tenten said. They relaxed for the rest of the evening together. They talked a bit and realized that they were practically 1 year closer to being shinobi. They finally got tired and decided to get some sleep. 5 months later, another 5 months passed before anyone knew what happened. Tenten was turning 7 today and Naruto was practically running in circles trying to figure out what to get her. Over the last few months, Naruto had talked with Inoichi every now and again. It was at first to make sure that Naruto wasn't being affected by Kyuubi's chakra. After the first visit, however, they realized he was fine. After that, Inoichi got together with him just to chat. The boy was very friendly and Inoichi eventually introduced him to his daughter Ino. They got along fair enough at first. When Ino met Tenten as well, however, they began to get along much better. Ino and Tenten became fast friends and decided to hang out at the park. Naruto and Tenten jogged to every morning and afternoon once in a while. It was Ino's idea that got Naruto out of hot water. Ino had planned to give Tenten a bit more formal Chinese-style dress. She told Naruto to get 2 sets of hair sticks that went with the dress. Naruto had managed to save up enough money to afford a pair of wooden hair sticks that were carved beautifully. He had met the Chunin that was on medical leave downstairs a few months back and talked to him once in a while. He was in his late teens and had been hit by a very strong lightning jutsu that fried the nerves in half of his body. The doctors were worried about operating on him while he was still growing at all, so put in him leave until after he stopped growing. Naruto had offered to help him out every week to make a little bit of money. He had been keeping it separate from his weekly allowances from the Hokage. He had enough money to buy the hair sticks and also decided to take her out to dinner later this evening as well. He realized he would be sorely underdressed, but it was for her after all, not him. The party started off casual enough. Neiko came up with some books she used to read when she was younger. Inu stopped by for a moment to give Tenten a scroll on slightly more advanced kunai throwing techniques before he had to run. Ino came by a little later with Shikamaru and Choji in tow. They all got to know each other and all got along as a group. Ino had explained that their parents were a famous shinobi group known for their teamwork. Naruto, Shikamaru and Choji were talking about more boy stuff while Ino and Tenten were having a girls-only talk. Ino was asking if he held her hand and things like that, making Tenten blush a little bit. She had never thought of Naruto that way, had she? With Naruto's group, they were talking about what it was going to be like in the academy in a few years. Choji and Shikamaru had a general idea. Their parents were shinobi after all. Naruto drank up the info like his life depended on it. The party was slowing down a bit and Ino finally gave Tenten her the dress she got her. Tenten almost broke out in tears at how beautiful it was before giving Ino a huge hug. She rushed out to the bedroom to put it on. Okay Naruto, when she comes back out you gotta compliment her on how good she looks and then give her your gift to her. Got it? Ino asked in a bossy tone. Naruto nodded and grabbed his present that he had hid in a cupboard they never used. A minute later Tenten came out in her dress with a huge smile on her face. Naruto stood there with a silly grin on his face and his cheeks a little pink. Wow, she really is pretty, he thought. So, how does it look? Tenten asked. It looks great Tenten-chan. Naruto managed to spit out finally. It really does look great Tenten. Ino said as well. The other boys just nodded as well. Here Tenten-chan, I got you this. Naruto said as he fumbled with the box in his hands. Tenten opened the box and her eyes opened as wide as saucers. She knew Ino came from a wealthy family, so it didn't surprise her too much when she gave her such a nice dress. But when Naruto gave her the beautiful hair sticks she didn't know what to say. Ino got up and helped her put her hair back up with the hair sticks in and lead her to the mirror. Tenten started crying at how beautiful she looked. She was always a tomboy but she really liked being pretty like this once in a while. Naruto, seeing that she was crying, got up and asked her what was wrong. Nothing is wrong you idiot. They're just so beautiful, she said before throwing her arms around Naruto. I'm glad you like them Tenten-chan, Naruto said, returning the hug. Would you like to go out to a restaurant and eat tonight? Naruto asked. Sure, what brought that on? Tenten asked. Well, it is your birthday. I don't know how to cook and you cook all the time. I thought it would be nice to take you somewhere nice tonight. Naruto said, scratching the back of his head. Sure, Tenten said with a smile. They stayed and talked a bit more with everyone before everyone had to leave for dinner. They walked to a nice, semi-formal restaurant owned by the Akamichi family. They wouldn't turn Naruto away and already knew he was coming and saved him a booth. They ate quietly, they are still only 6 and 7 years old after all. They both saw it as any other dinner, just going somewhere nice. They started to walk back as it was starting to get dark. As they walked, Tenten saw that Naruto was still getting a lot of nasty glares. Now that she knew the reason for them, she was even more annoyed by them. She reached over and grabbed Naruto's hand and stuck her tongue out at a young adult that was staring Naruto down. Naruto blushed a little bit before looking at Tenten. Seeing that she was sticking her tongue out, he stuck his tongue out at the guy too before laughing with her. Damn demon whore. The drunk literally spat out, spitting on Tenten's new dress. Tenten growled at the man, but Naruto instead whistled as loud as he could. The man did not get a chance to yell out another insult before he was struck in the back of the head with the hilt of a sword. Thank you Itachi-san. How is your evening going? Naruto asked casually. It is going well Naruto-kun, or it was until you made me some more paperwork. Itachi said sarcastically. We can't all be having fun now, can we? Naruto said with a smile. Happy birthday Tenten-san, I had almost missed it. Itachi said, tossing a small box to Tenten. Tenten smiled, catching the box and opening it. Inside was a pair of small earrings, the same color as her dress. She looked at Naruto and he looked away, knowing he was busted. Thank you Itachi-san, they are very lovely, she said with a small bow. Think nothing of it, I better get back to work, enjoy the rest of your evening. Itachi said, throwing the man he had knocked out over his shoulder and disappearing. Naruto and Tenten started walking back towards their apartment, this time still hand in hand. The few civilians that had seen Naruto call an Uchiha and was apparently very friendly with him stayed clear of them. Tenten was curious, so she asked Naruto how he called Itachi. He hadn't, he just heard the guy call him a demon, so just whistled to scare everyone else. Tenten laughed until they finally made it back home. They got inside and sat down. They were both wore out after a fun day. Tenten looked down and saw the spit still on her dress. She frowned at it. Before she could react, Naruto had taken a napkin from the table and started to wipe it off. Tenten blushed and grabbed his hand. Naruto looked at her with a confused look. I got it Naruto-kun, she said, trying not to turn too red. Oh, here, he said, giving her the napkin. She wiped off the rest of the spit from his stomach before tossing the napkin back on the table. Blah, I still feel dirty from that. I'm going to go take a shower, Tenten said, walking toward the bedroom to get something to change into. Naruto sat around for a while waiting for her to get out of the shower. He decided to just get ready for bed. He went ahead and set his futon up and started to pick up the place a little. He threw away the napkins and wiped off the table. When he heard the water turn off, he washed the dishes as well. When Tenten got out of the bathroom, she saw Naruto cleaning and smiled. She threw her arms around him and thanked him for the best birthday ever. Naruto returned the hug as said, "What are friends for?" Tenten smiled and gave him one last squeeze before letting him go. She helped him finish cleaning up the house and went to her bed. She laid down and pulled out one of the books Naoko had given her. They finally fell asleep and both dreamed about the future. One a little differently than they had even the night before.